I'm City Manager T.C. Broadnax, and welcome to the Dallas Police Chief Candidates Forum. As we near the successful culmination of a search for Dallas's next Chief of Police, first and foremost, I want to express my continued support and appreciation for the men and women of the DPD who have embodied professionalism and our values of service during exceptionally challenging times this year. Under the city's charter, as Dallas's chief executive, the authority to hire the next police chief is mine, not the city council's. But despite being all virtual for the first time to slow the spread of COVID-19, this search process has been inclusive, transparent, with thousands of residents providing feedback on their priorities. This week, 7 candidates from across the United States and within our ranks of the department were interviewed by community members from more than 50 organizations representing cultural and diversity organizations, police oversight, nonprofit and faith-based groups, neighborhood and business associations, our city executive staff, as well as law enforcement partners throughout the Metroplex, and the police associations. I want to extend my sincere thanks to those who volunteered their time to participate in these interview panels, and to all who have taken their time to share their thoughts through the survey instruments that we provided. Now I'd like to turn it over to our moderator this afternoon, Gary Peterson, founder and CEO of Public Sector Search and Consulting. Mr. Peterson is our executive search professional with experience hiring chiefs in other cities, including Nashville, Sacramento, Seattle, as well as San Francisco. We will spend the next 3 hours in conversation with our esteemed candidates. Welcome, candidates, and I look forward to hearing from you. Gary?
Thank you, City Manager Broadnax. I also want to welcome the public and the candidates to this public interview forum. I want everyone to know that Councilwoman Gates, the chair of the Public Safety Committee, sought input from all council members, who in turn provided questions to Ms. Gates. Where the questions overlapped, they were consolidated, and these are the questions we're going to ask today. We still have more than 25 questions because we wanted to ensure that we were asking the right question. As City Manager Broadnax indicated, we conducted an additional survey this past weekend, and over 800 residents responded and provided feedback that helped us prioritize the topics that they want to hear the candidates talk about and address. The topics were violent crime, accountability, community trust, property crimes, and department morale. So I arranged the questions to reflect the community sentiment. As stated, the forum will end at 5 o'clock, and any questions that were not asked will be forwarded to the city manager's team for consideration in the remainder of the process. Candidates, welcome. Please keep your answers to 3 to 4 minutes. At the 3-minute mark, I'm going to provide you with a 1-minute warning and ask you to conclude. We'll rotate the order of the candidates so everyone has an opportunity to go first. As stated, please mute your mic when you are not speaking. At about 3:30, we'll have a 5-minute break to provide for personal necessities. With that having been said, there's no questions from the candidates. I will begin. Hearing none, we're going to start with the first question. We're going to go, this first question we'll do alphabetical. We'll start with Major Malik Aziz. Please introduce yourself and include your experience managing a police department and why you believe you're the best fit for Dallas. And in that response, indicate whether you speak multiple languages, and if so, which ones. And you're on mute, Malik.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. How you doing today? I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm Malik Aziz from Dallas, Texas. I was born in West Dallas, what is known as the West Dallas Projects. which was the largest in the nation at the time, next to the lead smelter. My mother worked in the cafeteria before working herself up to the classroom. That took us around Dallas, South Dallas, Hatcher and Spring Garden, Old Hatcher, over the Highland Hills and Alta Mesa area. And then we finally moved over to Oak Cliff and Glen Oaks, where I actually graduated from Carter High School. I obtained a Bachelor's of Arts in Criminology from UT Arlington and an MBA from the GSM, Graduate School of Management from the University of Dallas. I have two adult children. My son is a graduate of UT Arlington himself, looking for a job in teaching, and my daughter is in her last year and a half of UT Arlington studying nursing. She wants to be a nurse practitioner. I have almost 29 years, just a month shy of 29 years. I spent about 2 years, 4 or 5 months with Dallas Sheriff's Office before joining Dallas Police. I served as an adjunct professor at the prestigious DeSales University, where I teach graduate level students in police leadership. I also chair the Dallas Police Museum Board, and I'm the former chairman and executive director of the National Black Police Association, the longest serving chairman in its history. I've worked in every capacity in Dallas Police Department and every patrol division I've been assigned in some form or matter. I graduated from all the top police command schools, from the FBI National Academy out of Quantico, the Senior Management Institute of Police out of Boston, uh, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, leading in police organizations. I received the Texas Legislature Outstanding Texan Award and the NAACP's Joe Bagby Police Leadership Award. I've had some significant assignments in my career. I commanded the first Black Lives Matter protest in 2013, which was so noted by Reverend Freddie Haynes and Commissioner Price, who gave me an external commendation for the way I handled the event with thousands of people on the plaza, as well as the mayor's rally for Real Men Don't Hit Women. I'm the first three-time commander of the State Fair of Texas, operating with 3.5 million visitors over 24 days with no major incidents. 6 years of crime reduction at Northwest Division, 2 years in double digits. I commanded the largest security event in the city or the history of Dallas, which was the Bush Library dedication, coordinating and planned the police response that included an operation of about 800 police officers without any incident. Special projects, I instituted the Early Intervention, Early Warning Program under Chief David Brown, where I was sent to 3 or 4 cities across the nation and did research to implement that program. I was assigned to communications in some critical times of call taker crisis and RMS crisis. I've been assigned to major operations across the department, commander of numerous parades and events. And what I just laid out would make me the right fit at the right time to be the police chief of Dallas. I only have knowledge of Spanish and Arabic. I do not speak either in a fluent manner. I can write and translate Spanish to about 50% and Arabic just a little bit more.
Thank you, Major Aziz. We're going to go to Chief Rochelle Brackney.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for the invitation and, more importantly, the opportunity to participate. It is a snow and sleet storm on the East Coast here, so I may have some connectivity issues that you don't experience in the Midwest or the West Coast. Let me introduce a little bit about myself. Every one of you has a resume. You have our credentials. You have our pedigree. Yes, you'll know that this is my second chief of police job, and opportunity to have the third chief of police job would be amazing. On my resume, you'll see the traditional credentials that the rest of the candidates have. You know, we've graduated from the FBI National Academies, SMIP out of Boston, the Dignitary and Secret Service Academies for myself, and Dignitary Protection, Redstone, Arsenal Bomb School, all are part of my repertoire. But what you don't see on our resumes, and that you don't often get the opportunity here, are the things that would make us the best fit. And those don't show up as a pedigree. They don't show up on your certificates. They don't guarantee success in any place or in any position. What guarantees that you are the best fit for Dallas is that your vision and your values are aligned with those of the community that you are there to serve. It's your experiences, both your lived and shared experiences in this policing profession that will allow me to be successful as the next chief. I've had the opportunity to manage very different policing departments, post-secondary educational ones in the middle of downtown Washington, D.C., which has challenges beyond any other. When on any day you'll encounter someone who not only are you not familiar with their language, but you're not familiar with their experiences. You have to be able to navigate that with humility and with professionalism. I have the practical experiences, but I also have the academic experiences, holding both bachelor's and master's degrees from Carnegie Mellon University, but also a doctorate that I obtained in 2 years and 6 months while working full time, doing a chief of police job. And what you'll find out is even in my studies is long before it became fashionable to talk about these issues, my studies centered on violence in urban communities and the impact it has on African American males particularly, and how resilient they can or can't be in the communities. What you won't see on my resume are my values. What you won't see on my resume is long before we talked about cultural humility, I was designing those curriculum for the state of Pennsylvania for all officers in order to be certified as police officers in the state of Pennsylvania. What you won't see is the many hours that I spent as the lead of our training academy in Pittsburgh and designing curriculum and pedagogy so that we would have the best training for our officers in the spaces in which they were going to operate. What you don't see, more importantly, is the community that I came from. I am a prodigy of inner city communities. I grew up in Pittsburgh in one of the most violent communities. It was 1.1 square mile, but it contributed to half of the homicides that occurred in the city of Pittsburgh. Poverty rates range around 80%, where people are living below the poverty ranges. And that's where I came out of. I grew up poor as well, understanding that 8 people, 6 kids, how does that feel when your dignity is being stripped from you as you go into supermarkets and have to use food stamps and people look at you differently because you're poor, when they look at you differently because you're multi-ethnic, when they look at you differently when they don't think you belong into those communities. What uniquely positions me for Dallas is because Dallas is who we all are right now, and Dallas can lead the way in police reform and cultural reform. I have not only the expertise to do that, but the lived experiences as well as the academic experiences. And I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Chief Brackney. We're going to go to Chief Eddie Garcia.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. And I just wanted to spend a few moments explaining about my experiences and why I feel I'm the best fit for Dallas. I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I moved to San Jose, California as a young boy. I learned how to speak English in San Jose, California. And, one of the things that I'll remember becoming a young officer, I was 21 years old when I became a police officer in the city of San Jose. And one of the things that I'll say then that still rings true now is that it doesn't matter who you're from, where you are, your racial makeup, ethnicity, language spoken, that if you're a stranger or a visitor in this city, in our city, that I'll understand because I was there, having to go through that. At age 12, I began being raised by a single mom, and those experiences still live through to me. And those experiences are some of the things that shape the way I lead a police department. We're all fortunate to be here at this forum. We've all received awards from our communities, and most of us all are only here because those that work with us and those that answer to us put us in these positions. And so I am forever grateful to the men and women of the San Jose Police Department, for without which I would not even be in this position. And I'm grateful for their work and their effort. In San Jose, as a police officer, I've worked the units. I've worked narcotics enforcement. I've worked our SWAT team, our merge team. I've worked fugitive apprehension. I was a homicide investigator. I've commanded our vice and criminal intelligence units. and others as a commander. And I'll say this because I know what it feels like for our men and women as they go out every day to sacrifice what they sacrifice for the safety of our communities. You know, I understand what it feels like, especially today, as our community calls for reform and professionalism, because we as a profession, our beloved profession, has to get better, and we will get better. You know, as I moved through the ranks, I was the executive assistant in the 10th largest city in the country for 3 years. I became the chief of police in San Jose for 5 years, began in 2016 of, again, the 10th largest city in the country. And I've sat in the seat and I've had to make the decisions and I've made my mistakes. We've had more successes than we had mistakes, but to me, I wear them. And I tell you that I've learned from those being in the position, not having the luxury of being able to say that the decision was made over me, because I made those decisions. And I'm proud of making the decisions that I made, and I learned from the mistakes that I made. We operated in a time of non-crisis in San Jose. When you look at the initiatives that we instituted, whether it's instituting bias-based policing, procedural justice, history of law enforcement in America, use of force issues, religious exemption issues, we did all that to collectively and as a community, starting in 2016. We didn't wait for a crisis to befall us. We started working knowing in this imperfect profession that it's very important to work in times of non-crisis. We've been here before in American law enforcement, and this is the most critical time. I want to continue to lead. I want to continue to have an opportunity to learn from the examples that I've done in San Jose, particularly sitting in the seat of the chief of police in the 10th largest city in the country, to be able to bring those experiences to the city of Dallas and for us to learn and to develop the department and strive to make Dallas a better community. You know, this department in the city is not broken. It's an enviable position to be in when we're at, to be able to lead such a fantastic police department in its community. You know, the experiences that we all bring, you know, make us, you know, very good candidates for this position because of our experiences. And I feel that my experiences as being the chief will enable to do that. We've dealt, one of the beauties of Dallas is its diversity. San Jose is extremely diverse. Going from one area to the city, very different. I like to think I was everyone's police chief, not just one group. And I'm proud to do that. And that's something I bring to Dallas. When it comes to speaking another language, nací en San Juan, Puerto Rico. Aprendí a hablar inglés en San José. Y es algo que me ha ayudado mucho con nuestra comunidad y algo que me puede ayudar en cualquier comunidad que tenemos aquí en Dallas, que es latino también. And what I said was basically I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I learned how to speak English in San Jose. It certainly helped me with the community in San Jose, and it certainly would help me in any community, particularly your Latino community here in Dallas. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Chief. We're going to go to former Deputy Chief Albert Martinez.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes a todos. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us and to hear your Chief of Police candidates. To answer the question, I'm Albert Martinez. I served 26 and a half years with the Dallas Police Department in various positions, as mentioned here, that my resume shows a robust level of experience. I grew up in West Texas, and I came to Dallas for the opportunity, like many have, to the big city for opportunity for job and to begin a life, to begin a career. My department and my city have been tremendously good to me, not so much just because I achieved a high rank, just because of the opportunity to really set my roots here and grow a family, friendships, and partnerships throughout the city, throughout the Metroplex. And so the way my career really started moving forward after time in patrol, I had the opportunity to go to the assault unit in the Crimes Against Persons Division to work under Sergeant Sprecher and Sergeant R.T. Smith. I had that opportunity because I was a Spanish speaker. Jose Munoz and I were selected because of the need in the unit. And one thing I was always committed to, is including when I got my bachelor's degree, was that I would seek any opportunity I could be given and exceed that expectation. And that has really defined my career throughout the police department. From the assault unit, I was then made a sergeant, became a supervisor. I was asked to lead the first unit, that was the Operation Disruption Unit. It was a specialized unit. I was handpicked by then Lieutenant Charles Cato, and then went on to a prestigious unit called the Public Integrity Unit, where we investigated public corruption. As moving on forward and promoting to lieutenant, then I was Chief Brown created the position of major. I was one of 12 PERT lieutenants selected to become a major back in October 2012. From there, I lasted all of 10 months in that position when Chief Brown then saw fit to promote me to deputy chief and assigned me to the personnel division, where I was in charge of hiring, recruiting, training, and other assignments. And 2 years after that, I was assigned to be the chief over the Southwest Patrol Division. And under Chief Hall, she expanded our responsibilities. And then I had 2 patrol divisions, which then included South Central Patrol Division, which was Oak Cliff and South Oak Cliff, and West Dallas as a whole. So about 22% of the city. But what more defines my experience with the police department is I've built a reputation of trust, of fairness, of dependability, committed to our mission and to our goals of serving our citizens, our residents, our visitors. And even in my going to the Diocese of Dallas, it was an act of service to my faith, to my church, and the time of its need. And here I am now as seeking to this position. I think I'm the best fit for the Chief of Police of Dallas. I am a strategist and a collaborator, and built on my reputation and with the department and the officers and the non-sworn and the citizens. I've developed a successful career of collaboration, of listening and strengthening bonds that we have together. And right now, what we need more than anything is a leader that can recreate or rebuild those collaborative relationships and move us forward in so many diverse areas. And I believe I am the chief for this position.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Martinez. We're going to go to Assistant Chief Avery Moore. There you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Avery Moore. I'm an assistant chief with the Dallas Police Department. What makes me unique is I believe that I'm established, I'm proven, and I have a presence and respect internally as well as externally. I believe that we need the community to be effective. Their number one concern is violent crime. And I believe that we have to do a better job in including them in our decision-making as we tackle violent crime in the midst of this pandemic. I also believe that a leader has to first follow. He has to be willing to listen to his troops, listen to community members, listen to stakeholders, and collectively agree that we have to operate as one team. I want you to think of Avery Moore in this way. I'm like a race car that's freshly built at the starting line. My engine is large. My tank is full of experience, wisdom, respect, knowledge, and honor. And I'm waiting for the starter pistol to begin my career as the chief of police for the Dallas Police Department. Again, I've been here for 30 years. I've worked in every facet of this police department. Things I want to highlight is I was here when we had the first parade for the Dallas Cowboys that went bad. I was here. 2016, where we lost 5 officers, I was here. The George Floyd protest, I'm here. I'm committed, I'm dedicated to this police department. I love my officers. I tell them I love them. They are valuable. The citizens of this community are valuable. And we need a chief that is not just going to say, you can come and have a seat at my table. I pledge that I'll bring my table to you, and we'll sit down and collectively we will figure out a way, strategize to get rid of violent crime. Thank you for allowing me to apply for this job. It's a dream job for me. 30 years I've waited for this moment. And by the way, today's my birthday. I'm 5 years old today. So I would love to be the chief of our Dallas Police Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Moore, and happy birthday. Um, Certainly. So we're going to go to Deputy Chief Ruben Ramirez.
Thank you, Gary, and happy birthday to you, Avery. First, I want to say thank you to everyone for the opportunity to interview for Police Chief of Dallas. My background, briefly, I grew up in South Texas, son of a farmer, dad who's got the toughest, strongest work ethic of anyone I've ever known, a mother who epitomizes and embodies service first and placing others before herself. I grew up eventually leaving Floresville at the age of 19, went on to college. I have 2 college degrees. I have an undergrad from Midwestern State and a graduate degree from Southern Methodist University. I started with the Dallas Police Department when I was 22 years old. I spent the last 25 years with the Dallas Police Department serving in various roles. I have been assigned as an undercover narcotics detective. I've been assigned as a supervisor over the Fusion Center during its inception in 2007. I've been a supervisor in the Public Integrity Unit. I've been a unit commander over the Criminal Intelligence Unit. I've been a unit commander over major crimes. I've been the division commander of internal affairs, and now I'm currently the bureau commander over all criminal investigations in the city of Dallas. I also serve as the legislative affairs liaison to the city of Dallas, meaning that every other year, the police department and the city send me to Austin, Texas to represent our police department on proposed legislation and the impacts of those legislations on our community and our police department operations. I'm also the Latino liaison to the chief of police, and I'm also a board member on the Criminal Justice Advisory Board for Dallas County. Each of these roles has afforded me the opportunity to travel throughout the country and throughout the state and represent this police department. I am grateful for all of the opportunities that I've had. I've been able to liaison with our federal and state partners. I carry federal credentials from my assignments in criminal intelligence over the Joint Terrorism Task Force and dignitary protection. I also have the clearances that go along with those roles. I have been given opportunities to meet stakeholders within our community. I've visited with people who are just deeply embedded in this community and have love for this community and want to see our community thrive and grow. I've had the opportunity to meet business leaders, faith leaders, leaders from our immigrant community, leaders from town hall and community crime watch groups throughout the city of Dallas. My family and I live in Dallas. My wife and my 2 boys, Ryan and Adam. My in-laws live in Dallas. Our grandparents live in Dallas. We understand the effects of violent crime. We see the ripple effects of what they do to our communities when we see violent crime spike the way it has in our city and throughout the country. I know the economic impacts that it has on our community, on our business community. There is no one in the city of Dallas who knows violent crime better than I do. Every single violent crime that occurs in this city, from family violence to youth crimes, homicide, robberies, assaults, and everything in between, travels through my office. I feel that with the relationships that I have in this community, the trust that I've developed in this community, the federal and state partners and network that I have throughout the country, and the trust and respect that I have developed with this Dallas Police Department, I feel I'm best fit to serve this department. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Ramirez. We're going to go to our 7th candidate, Chief Jeff Spivey. Chief.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Gary. Thank you for the opportunity to the members of the public who are viewing this broadcast. It's truly an honor and a privilege to be considered as one of the finalists for the Dallas Chief of Police position. Let me start by talking a little bit about my experience as an Irving police officer. I stopped going to college when I was 19 and got married and had to move to the Dallas-Fort Worth area to get a job so that my wife could continue her schooling. I found my home at the Irving Police Department as a public service officer where I worked until turning 21 and became a police officer. Then over the next 13 years, I served in several different roles: patrol officer, undercover narcotics, federal task force officer, and then crimes against persons detective before promoting to my first rank as sergeant. Over the next several years, I ascended through the ranks: sergeant, lieutenant, captain, was appointed assistant chief. in 2011 and served under Chief Boyd for 5 years, with a front row seat of watching how he led an organization and seeing what it took to be a chief of police. But one of the things that was lost on me was the amount of stress, the amount of pressure, the difficult decisions that come with being a chief of police that I don't think anyone recognizes or can understand until they sit in that number one seat. That was a wake-up call for me when I was appointed chief of police in 2017. There was certainly some growing pains, certainly some mistakes that were made along the way, but each one of those, I think, better prepared me for my next journey, which would be the chief of police for the Dallas Police Department. I've had a unique front row seat, spending 34 years in Irving, being able to watch what goes on in the city of Dallas, being able to observe how the city of Dallas polices its residents. I've had the opportunity to work with a number of police officers, police commanders, most recently Chief Hall. Working with that department has really given me an inside view of the organizational challenges that exist, the difficulties between the relationships with the community, the relationships with the politicians, and some of the infighting that occurs within all organizations. No organizations are immune to that. But I've been uniquely positioned to where I'm an outsider, but really have an inside view on the local going-ons of the Dallas Police Department. As chief of police, I've already addressed some of the same issues that are facing the Dallas Police Department today. I've brought a peer support team to ensure that our employees had the best mental health services that they could have. Adding to those peer support services, an employee assistance program that was specific to public safety personnel. Again, allowing those officers a place to reach out when they needed help. We addressed mental health in our community by forming our mental health response team, pairing police officers with a clinician to go out and be proactive in addressing mental health crisis before those individuals found themselves in crisis. I created our first LGBTQ liaison. We led the nation, or the state, I'm sorry, we led the state in becoming the first police department in being recognized by the International Association of Chiefs of Police One Mind campaign. And so I've addressed these issues as chief of police, sitting in that seat. And I think what makes me a unique candidate is I have that inside perspective, and yet I also come in as an outsider, not a prisoner to any of the structures that already exist, not a prisoner to the culture that already exists, but the ability to look at the organization with new eyes and make the changes necessary. Now, I don't speak any languages other than English. However, the city of Irving is a very diverse community. Over 81 languages are spoken in the city of Irving.
Wow.
My ability not to speak those languages has not hampered my ability to establish relationships within those communities. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Chief Spivey. Appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to change the order up a little bit as we move through, and then we're going to rotate. Everyone will get a chance to go first. And so we're going to stay with Major Aziz on this next question, and then we're going to rotate down. Chief Spivey, you'll be on deck. So it's question number 2. Dallas is experiencing murders at a rate not seen in 16 years. What do you believe are the drivers of violent crime, and what's your strategy to reduce it? What, if any, of the specific strategies the cities of Dallas's violent crime reduction plan would you discontinue? And a side note, Public Safety Committee Chairwoman Gates also wants to make sure we address family violence in this answer. So Major Aziz, you're up first.
Yes. Well, I mean, living in this city, I think we've all seen what has occurred in homicidal violence and violence as a whole, as the city has tried to progress and quell those types of incidents now. Living here in my life, that I've seen violence, at its very start, even 1991, where we had 500 murders, and we were considered the murder capital per 100,000 people in the nation. Then I was here when gangs took over the city and crack cocaine inundated my neighborhoods and turned family members and friends into addicts. And homicidal violence was almost a way of life, especially in the southern sector. Looking at the numbers and how we see them now, being well over 230, murders or 234 murders at last, as of yesterday when I looked, the overall crime being up 1.5%. The drivers of violent crime, there are numerous drivers to violent crime, and that includes the drug trade with the different gangs, organized gangs. We have over 300 gangs in this city, many of them operating inside of the drug trade and gun trade and committing violence, operating out of a level of greed that we haven't seen. Family violence murders being up, at least 33 murders associated with domestic violence. Poor conflict resolution, that's been another driver of crime, that we have poor skills from early on until we become adults. We have loosening gun laws that the illegal gun trade is exploiting. Other complex reasoning that police don't have anything to do with, and that's poverty, parental neglect, low self-esteem, alcohol and drug abuse, and the poor economic conditions, poverty, which gets us to operate in a vicious cycle, or what I've labeled a vicious cycle. And that vicious cycle is we grow up in poor neighborhoods, and we get a poor education from a low performing or poor school. And we get out of there and we have a poor job waiting on us, and we marry another person who came in the same conditions, or we partner with another person in the same conditions and have children and bring them up in the same cycle, a vicious cycle of poverty that drives those things. And those are a few things that are the drivers of violent crime. So how do we look at this? Let's look at it from one side of it. When we have in homicide unit, we got 29 detectives, and 7 of them are in training and operating from 10 to 14 cases each. Well, even with an FBI standard, it's 4 cases. But just adding to it, when they're operating with over 600 unexplained deaths or 900 natural deaths and over 120 accidental deaths, and just a total amount of unrelated deaths that homicide unit, we have to bring that up to around 35 detectives and drive the caseload down, because clearance rates have shown to go up. And that's just one side of it, of adding it up. But we should follow in KPMG plan, dealing with civilian investigators and adding cold case and contracting with genealogists to nothing worse than a family who has a unsolved murder that's went on for years, and we haven't been able to solve it.
You got about 30 seconds, Major Aziz.
I'm sorry, you told me I had.
You got about 30 seconds.
Okay, well, I finished
for this question. Go ahead.
Okay, well, let me finish up with this. Then I believe that we should review some of the zip codes, revamp and update our risk terrain modeling, and beef up our patrol deployments, gang units, and partner with the community, with community-based efforts and youth programs, Ceasefire, PAL, the reentry and rehab programs, the first offender program, and add those community partnerships that build trust with solid community programs, and partnering with NGOs and Chamber of Commerce and all segments of the community with advocates and activists. And finally, we should establish the 21st Century Policing Bureau that lends ourselves to reducing homicidal violence while working with the community in every aspect.
Thank you, Major Aziz. Appreciate that answer. We're going to go to Chief Spivey. Do you need the question again?
No, sir, I have.
Okay.
So as you look at violent crime, I think the lazy way to account for violent crime, especially in 2020, has been to blame COVID. And while I do believe the pandemic has had some effect on the rising crime rates across the country, if you look back at violence actually started going up a couple of years ago across of the nation. And Dallas and the Dallas-Fort Worth area is no different. So you have to really drill down to understand what are those root causes, what is causing crime to increase. And I think there's several different reasons. Major Aziz hit on some of those: poverty, lack of educational opportunities, lack of job opportunities, addiction and lack of services to treat addiction, and then mental health. All of those issues that I just talked about aren't police issues, yet we've been given the task of solving those issues because we're the most visible form of government, and we're not best suited to address those. Where we can make an impact and where we should make an impact is providing proactive crime strategies to these areas that are facing increases in violence. Working with our local, state, and federal partners to bring in resources and innovation to address violent crime. Specifically working with the district attorney's office to ensure that the arrests that we make, especially related to gun crimes, are being prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And those individuals who are possessing illegal weapons, those felons who are involved in criminal activity, are held accountable for those actions. Even if we keep them off the street for 48 hours, those violent felons are 48 hours without the opportunity to create more violence in our community. And so we have to really be targeted in who we're addressing with our enforcement activities. As I looked at the violent crime plan for the city of Dallas, I saw a lot of those strategies already built into that. And I think it's a solid plan that just continues to need effective leadership and oversight to ensure that we're all on board, that we're all working towards the same goal. The one thing that I saw that was maybe underemphasized in the plan was that community trust building aspect. If we're going to talk about long-term solutions to violent crime, we're first going to have to engage the community. We're going to have to get them involved in the solution. We're going to have to win their trust because they're the ones who are going to serve as witnesses. They're the ones who are going to tell us where the drug houses are. They're the ones who are going to call the police when something doesn't look right. And if they don't trust the police department, they're not going to make that phone call. So if we're talking long-term, then we need to address community trust and legitimacy first and foremost in order to have an impact. As it relates to family violence, the city of Irving, the Irving Police Department's been proactive in family violence investigations and trying to stem family violence crimes for many years. We have the only one of its kind city-led family advocacy center where we have not only our crimes against children investigators, our domestic violence investigators. We have them housed with our victim services counselors. We have them housed with our long-term counseling services. We have Dallas Children Advocacy employees on site. We have Child Protective Services on site. And then we have an office for individuals from the Dallas County District Attorney, giving our victims a one-stop shop to come to seek help, to seek resources, to get out of those violent relationships. That's what we have found to be successful in the city of Irving.
Thank you, Chief Spivey. Appreciate that. Okay, so the same question to Assistant Chief Moore.
So let me first start off by saying what Major Aziz said, I agree with, but I want to add a little bit of clarity. I think when you look at violent crime, I read a lot. I'm an avid reader. And I read a couple of articles from criminologists and doctors. And what they said is when you look at urban violence, you got to really look at the root of it. So they challenged me in this book with this statement. They said, as violent crime grows up in a major city, what catastrophic event occurred before it? And what they're saying is typically it's a result of something. So I believe what Chief Spivey said is true. You can't blame it on the pandemic because before the pandemic started, we didn't have this surge. But after the George Floyd event, violent crime went up throughout this nation. So you got to look at why. And here's the reason why. A lack of trust from the community. If the community does not trust the police department, it will not call the police department with information. I believe that there's not a single homicide in this city that someone didn't know about before it happened, while it was happening, or shortly thereafter. So if we do not build community trust, we will not be able to slow down this epidemic I call homicides. So I'm a big advocate for community building. I believe that in the city of Dallas, we've done a great job with community engagement, but we haven't done a good job with community inclusion. And this all falls under the umbrella of community policing. So if you really want to affect violent crime, urban violent crime in any city, the community has to be a large component of that. And you have to work diligently to build that trust. So I made the statement earlier that I would bring my table to you and we would sit down, we would discuss crime relative to your area, because the city of Dallas is highly diversified. There's over 200 spoken dialects here. So you have to be willing as a leader to go out and ask the community, how do you want to be policed? Not enforced. We're trying to attack an issue, not people. And what I find is people will tell you exactly how they want to be policed. That's how you collaborate. Then we have to have collaboration from City Hall, from the mayor's office, all the council people, business people, everybody that has a stake in the city of Dallas has to be on the same page, has to have the same focus point, because this is what the community wants. They want a reduction in violent crime. And that's what I believe you need to do to have that reduction. What was the second part to your question, Gary?
The second part is what specific strategies in the violent crime reduction plan would you discontinue? And you've got about 1 minute.
Yes, sir. So the crime to me, and I've shared this with Chief Hall, is missing the community piece. Chief Spivey was correct. You have to have inclusion. If you don't have inclusion, then it looks like you're trying to do spot enforcing. I believe in hotspot policing. The key is policing, not enforcement. We all have to work together. We all have to be sick and tired of crime. We all have to work at building that bridge that's missing called trust. The third part, sir?
The last part was the family violence issue.
Family violence issue is the same thing. I believe that the victims of family violence don't trust the police for whatever reason. I believe if we can connect with them, have conversations, and encourage them to reach out to social services that are available. Many of them don't know they're available. So if we can do that as a police department, then I think we can help family violence as well. Because again, if you look at crime and you study it the way I do, that's the root. It's a lack of trust because people just don't trust the police. And we have to be honest about that. And we have to say, that's what we're going to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief Moore. Appreciate it. We're going to go the same question to Chief Brackney.
So thank you for the question. I really think we need to separate and not conflate these issues. The question is, how do we address homicides that are on the rise across the nation? What we've done and what we typically
Gary?
hear
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Rochelle, we can barely hear you.
Is this better?
A little bit.
Your volume up?
Let's try some headphones. Again, we're in the middle of a sleet storm here, so that may be part of it. Gary, hopefully this doesn't go against my time frame.
No, you're good.
Is that better? Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, that is
Yes.
better. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I will adjust my headphone as we have the opportunity to do so. But more importantly, when we're talking about this, what I'm actually attempting to do is that we decouple these issues and first address homicides and how they've increased across the nation. What there's often a failure to do is to really understand what those drivers are of violence and crime are. Social disorganization theory tells us years ago, as early as the 1960s, that when you don't have community support,
in if you don't have support in communities, institutional support, resources, economies, educational systems, social services, the likely outgrowth is going to be violence. And typically in minority communities, Black communities, the cities will remove those resources. Don't believe that they have the option or the opportunities to put them in and be effective in those areas. But how do you reduce homicides? You can normally connect homicides and predict when the next one is going to occur. And that occurs across the entire nation. When you have that very first homicide, it's normally going to be an outgrowth of some particular issue. Was it an economic issue, a power issue, mental health, emotional issues as well, are all drivers of your homicides. And using traditional policing approaches, trying to arrest your way out of these, are not going to get you where you need to be. We've attempted to arrest our way out of crime and crime increases, and it has been an abject failure. We've had the same kind of war on drugs mentality about violent crimes as we've had for decades now. How do you reduce the homicides? In Pittsburgh, I instituted a strategy to reduce homicides, and we're very intentional about them. We studied each homicide and then connected it using the Milwaukee trauma-informed model concept of that every person who's the victim of a homicide, that's going to move concentrically outward, and then there's going to be an impact to some other person. So there's going to be a likelihood that someone's going to retaliate or need to, justify what occurred there and to bring back some honor. You then have to couple that with the work that came out of John Jay University and these Project Safe Neighborhoods under David Kennedy that says you have to identify those persons who are most likely to commit violence, and then you engage them before they do so. These did occur under Operation Ceasefire up in Boston, but what was interesting about Operation Ceasefire, it was not an officer-led initiative, nor was it an institutional-led initiative. It came out of the churches and community groups and grassroots efforts to reduce violent crime in the communities. When we're looking at what might be the precursors to crime, poverty is definitely a precursor. People will create their own economies if they don't believe they have access to business economies as well. Domestic violence has always been an issue. Intimate partner violence has always been an issue. And the reason that it still continues to go on is because we are in a patriarchal system. And we're afraid and have access. Women don't often have access, and they're most likely to be victims of violence. But more importantly, let's talk about the reduction plan that is currently. The reduction plan that is currently out there does not have a systematic approach. It is a cobbled effect of just a bunch of technology and words, and does not seem to have a real targeted way in which you will go about reducing crime in the city of Dallas. It is not proactive. It does things like responding after the fact and does nothing more than roundups and highlights and constructs a story that is further using institutional policing strategies versus procedural policing strategies.
What would you discontinue, Dr. Brackney?
So I would continue the actual technology portions in which they're using technology. I would discontinue the rapid approach. They have a group that's a rapid approach. And I also would look differently at the risk terrain model because it's simply more an environmental, trying to manage crime by environmental design.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Okay, we're going to go to the same question to Deputy Chief Ramirez.
Thank you. So as far as the fuelers of violent crime, I think there are many. First of all, there's just too easy access to weapons is one. I think there's a perceived lack of consequence for prosecution in some cases. And then there are many others that are environmental and social. There's certainly disparities in economics and opportunities. There is poor conflict resolutions. I think there is many examples of us just not winning the influence battle. There's just a high concentration of poor influences around many of our youths and adolescents, particularly in our minority communities. I think there is a prevalence of PTSD in our minority communities that many doesn't even really make the radar sometimes. But I don't see how you couldn't have have that with the amount of violence that we know occurs in our city and other cities in our minority communities. Everyone is brushed up to someone who has been impacted by some tragedy, either in their neighborhood or their schools or their family. And so that exists and it's real, and it's difficult to be an adolescent, period, let alone in a pandemic world or with a social media world and all the other stressors that they have. And you layer PTSD on that, and it makes it real difficult, I think, to make good decisions or to see hope and opportunity. And I think all of those are part of the fuelers of violent crime. But I'll talk specifically about what I would do. We have to discontinue deploying our resources based off antiquated models. Most police departments will look at persons, places, and behaviors and try to decide based on that data where they should deploy their resources. But those will almost always land you in minority communities and focusing on people of color. But that doesn't create trust in our communities. The communities deserve a police department that will look at data, and then we'll look at data from a 90-degree difference and then another 90-degree difference and another, until we have looked at all possibilities of how to create a robust strategic strategy. When we look at, so you also have to look at the people that we're arresting for violent crime and look at some of their backgrounds. If we take homicides, for example, we've identified up to 70% of our suspects in homicides that we've identified have some sort of criminal history that they've been handled for in the past. There's a high concentration of those 70%, upwards to around 80%, that all have either some sort of theft in their background or their record, some sort of drug use or abuse on their record, and then obviously they had access to a weapon and they shouldn't have. So you have to look in your communities and say, where are those locations where weapons exist? Where are those homes where people are taking stolen property or where thieves hang out? You don't have to look very far to know that it's drug houses. In the city of Dallas, we get about 6,000, upwards 6,800 drug house complaints a year in our city. In those drug houses, you have people who are making poor choices. You have people who are there buying illegal drugs. These people are showing up at these locations carrying drugs for protection. The people who are selling drugs in those locations are carrying drugs. The people who are selling drugs are carrying weapons. The people who steal our stolen property take that property to these drug houses to exchange for drugs. Often these drug houses are run by gang members. Every single thing that we're looking for in a crime fighting strategy is contained right there in a single drug house. And we have citizens who are calling us to those locations to the tune of 6,800 times a year. Our crime fighting strategy would focus directly on drug houses. They're dangerous, they're a nuisance, they create a culture and a influence that is corrosive to our neighborhoods. We would focus specifically on drug houses with the intention to eradicate our community, the drug houses from our community.
You got about 30 seconds.
That's all I need. We can on top of that, we can even layer random gunfire, which we hear at every community crime watch group that is their number one concern. It's random gunfire. You overlay those data and you will find yourself in drug houses again. That's the way we fight crime in the city. And some of the other areas I mentioned are outside of their non-enforcement issues, but we will work collaboratively, just like they do in family violence investigations, bringing social services and other resources to the table to help intercept those crimes before they become crimes. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Ramirez. Same question for Chief Garcia.
Thank you for the opportunity. A very important question, not just in Dallas, but in every city, particularly in Dallas. When we talk about the root causes, and I'll get right to it because there's a lot of information to cover, again, and things that people have said already, the root causes of violence in our communities is poverty, social inequality, education, job, socioeconomic, mental illness, substance abuse. We're a cog in that wheel, but we certainly aren't going to be the only answer to that. And so when we look at how we're going to get ourselves out of this, as Chief Brackney mentioned, we are not going to arrest our way out. There's some short-term solutions, long-term solutions. We need the community. We absolutely need the community's help. Just as important as we need the community, we need to ensure that our rank and file, that the men and women that are going to be sacrificing their lives for this city understand the mission and the goal. Without the buy-in of the men and women of the Dallas Police Department, we can say whatever we want, write anything we want. We won't have real change. We need real change from the community, and we need to buy in from the community, And we need our rank and file to buy in as well. That is ultimately important. You know, the goals of any crime reduction strategy, after reading the literature, consulting experts, because I've consulted experts. As a matter of fact, I've consulted criminologists and that we've done work with in San Jose from the University of Texas, San Antonio. And one thing that we've done step to step and side to side is look at projects and roles that have worked in other cities, not simply coming up with things to see if they would work. You know, the goals are for less victims. The goals are for less perpetrators. The goals are for an increased sense of public safety in a community, because perceptions are reality in public safety. So there's several forms. The first one, we talk about hotspot policing. We know that we have to drill down and we need to be data driven. We know that the experts say that about 20 to 25% of our locations are responsible for about 80 to 85% of the calls for service in a city. We know that because we have empirical data from experts that tell us that. So we need to ensure that we look around this police department and we focus our efforts on, one, we need to be visible. Two, we need to have people investigating these crimes. And three, we need those to apprehend the individuals. And that's what we have to force our resources for. We know that in hotspot policing, what the experts say is that to spend 2 hours out of a shift in 15-minute increments has the most effective response when we're talking about hotspot policing. And you have to sell that, and you have to talk to your rank and file about it. And you have to do that. The next step that we have to do is called place network investigations. And it's similar to what Deputy Chief Ramirez just mentioned. It's identifying where these criminal networks meet. And we need to do a better job of intelligence to figure out where those places are and disrupt them there. And that's a short-term way to be able to be able to put a Band-Aid on an issue, because it's a Band-Aid, because we have to go long-term. And the long-term solution is when they talk about intelligence-based policing. And basically that is on focused deterrence. Focused deterrence is focusing on the right individuals to bring in, where we're focusing on gang members that are on probation or parole that have not yet graduated to violent crime. Bring them in, team up with our local, with our DAs, our federal partners and other partners throughout the state. And it's almost a carrot and a stick, where we're telling them that, and bring the community in, that we're not going to tolerate violence in our communities, that we're going to use all these tools to ensure violence is not in our communities. And these are the efforts and tools that we will use. And they're not very positive. And we need to sell that. But in addition to that, we need to bring in resources through faith-based organizations, through community-based organizations, through city resources, code enforcement, environmental services, education, jobs. I look and you know what? I've been very close to Dallas, and Dallas is near and dear to my heart for a very long time, and I've been looking forward to this opportunity. I will tell you, we have the third largest concentration of Fortune 500 companies. We need them to step to the plate to offer jobs for our people, because the way this works, the way we're not going to arrest our way, is we need to give people hope. We need to give them hope. We need to give them an avenue outside what they're doing to enter these criminal networks. And those are processes that have shown to have worked in other places. You cannot get it without buy-in from your community. I saw a recent article where you had pastors in South Dallas that were talking about how we need the police, that we need good policing, but we want the police. That is a precious gift that does not exist in every city, and we have it here in Dallas, and we need to build on that. But equally important is our rank and file and our men and women.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move to the next question. Somebody needs to mute. And we're going to start the next question with Chief Spivey. Violence disproportionately affects communities of color. What steps would you take to reduce crime in those communities? I think most of you partially answered that. What do you believe is the best approach to building trust between the police and the community?
I think trust building starts with a relationship. That relationship of trust begins when each party knows one another, and you don't get to know the other individual until you actually spend time with them. You actually understand where they come from. You understand their experiences. You understand their needs. You recognize the challenges that they face. We've talked about it: poverty, joblessness, mental illness. And then you begin to work and to put processes in place to address those needs. One of the, I think, most prevalent ways to develop trust within any organization and community relationship is through the concept of procedural justice. Procedural justice maintains that the process is more important during the interaction than the actual outcome of the interaction. And when you build on those 4 tenets, and something that I've done as chief of police is build both internal and external procedural justice, is building on the respect part. First, you have to demonstrate that there's a respectful interaction during the encounter. Second, there has to be a voice. You have to be willing, as a police officer, as a police leader, to listen to the other side. During that encounter, you just can't shut someone down. You can't shut someone off. You have to allow them the opportunity to have their side heard. Third is the transparency part. There are so many things that police do, police leaders, police officers, police in the community do, and we tell people, just trust us. We don't ever explain ourselves. We tell people, we're the police, just trust us. If we would just take a few extra minutes to explain, this is the reason why I stopped you. This is the reason why I have to have you get out of the car. This is the reason why I'm not taking this particular report. This is the reason why it took me 45 minutes to show up to your call. If we would just take a few extra minutes, be empathetic, understand where that is, where they're coming from, be transparent on why you're doing what you're doing. It goes so far in helping someone understand, and they might not end up agreeing with you, but at least they'll understand. And then the last part's fairness. Fairness is a given. No matter what your situation in life is, no matter if you're the CEO or an unemployed truck driver, you should be treated the same way. You should get the same type of police service that everyone else deserves, that everyone else desires. When you treat people through that procedural justice model, when you're showing them respect, you're being transparent, you're giving them a voice, and you're being fair, you then can really start developing community trust.
Thank you, Chief. Next person is going to be Assistant Chief Moore. And just let's do the second part of that question. What do you believe is the best approach of building trust between the police and the community? That's how we're going to handle that question for everybody.
Yes, sir. So the very first thing is you have to be what I consider myself a builder. You have to be willing to build relationships. You build relationships through effective communication. Chief Spivey hit on the word listen. That's a powerful word when you're talking about building relationships. When you will actually listen to a speaker, you're showing them respect, you're showing them value, and you're showing them that you care. And that's how you win people over. If you can show someone you care about them, then they're willing to actually help you facilitate and grow a relationship. So that's step one of what I would do. Secondly, you have to provide them with knowledge. A lot of times they don't understand what an officer can and cannot do. So that's an opportunity for you to explain to them the limitations of an officer. Many times when people call in about drug houses, they think officers can immediately shut them down. They don't know that there's a process, because everybody has the rights to be free and free of harassment, etc. Point being is we have to actually build a case before we can actually attack a drug house. Many people don't understand that. So again, knowledge. Third, again, is just officer presence. You know, when you go to a community, your presence is powerful. It's the very first thing that people see when you get out of the car. Professionalism is what I'm talking about. We have to show people that we're there to engage, not to enforce all the time. Many times it's a simple, hi, how are you doing? I'm Officer Moore. How can I assist you today? That opens up the door for a great relationship. What was the next part of the question, Gary?
I think I think you answered the question. It's just the best approach to building community trust with the police.
Okay, well, let me finish again by saying, I
You
think
got a
that is absolutely huge. Everybody has to be a builder. I'm a big advocate for inclusion, and that's how you include people. People have to feel valued. Officers have to feel valued. City Hall has to feel valued. Business owners, everybody that has a stake, once you can tell them and show them that they have value, then they're willing to come and help you resolve issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Moore. Chief Brackney, what do you believe is the best approach to building trust between the police and the community?
So thank you. The best approach to building trust between any person, including the community, and those persons who are part of the institution and government. And what we've not said to this point is acknowledging how we've damaged the community, acknowledging how we've been part of the process that has eroded the trust that the community has in our institutions and in our police departments. In Dallas Police Department, Charlottesville Police Department, where I'm from, and across the nation, we need to own how we have done that through systems and institutions that were built on supremacy. And once we own that and acknowledge that, and then be very transparent about what we're doing to dismantle that, acknowledging that our complicity through either enforcement of laws that have been disproportionately impacting minority communities, or spending time in communities over policing them and under protecting them. First, acknowledge those type of wrongs and harms that we've done in the community. Once you acknowledge that you've hurt someone or you've harmed them, that's the first step in building trust. The second part is then the transparency as to how you operate and what you will commit to from this point forward. Part of building trust is allowing access into your space. And you can do that by not hiding behind your policies and your procedures, and where you can allow transparency based on, where you have that discretion, do it. I post every one of our investigative detentions, better known as stop and frisk, on our website in Charlottesville. You can see when an officer encountered someone, whether it was officer initiated, and whether or not the race and gender and the legal outcome of that. And I do that monthly and have been doing it for 2.5 years since I've sat in that space. I open up all of our internal affairs complaints. I put the date and time we received them, a summary of that complaint, as well as the finding of that complaint, and the race and gender of the officer and the race and gender of the complainant. You can do a lot of things to establish trust. When we talk about our use of force, I post every one of those on our website. The summaries around that, the highest level of force used, and the race and gender of the officer, race and gender of the person that the force was used on. That's how you start to build legitimacy and trust with the communities. We know what the issues are. We know why the community doesn't trust us, but we always keep our cards close to our chest as though that we're not going to be exposed. Acknowledging what we've done, the damage we've done, and then committing to rectifying that, not continuing that business as usual approach to the communities. And don't need more time than that to expound on how you build legitimacy, trust in your communities.
Thank you, Dr. Brackney. Appreciate that. Okay. Deputy Chief Ramirez, same question. What do you believe is the best approach to building trust between the police and the community?
Well, first, I think we have to be visible. And while we're visible, we have to make sure that we are available and that we are accessible and that we are responsive. And we can't just drive through the neighborhoods. We've got to make sure that our presence there is a service to the public, and then that they know that they can contact us or that we're there to answer their questions. It's just, we've got to be approachable. We've got to be available. We've got to be visible. The next thing is we have to target hard, and we have to recognize that Community Crime Watch is the single greatest crime fighting strategy that any department has ever created, East Coast to West. It reduces crime, but it has to be done correctly. You have to go into a community and you have to tailor your message to that particular community, the types of crimes that affect that community. teach them things that we have learned from people that we've arrested as to why they were selected as a target. When you target hard in a community, you start to build relationships. Then the communication mechanism starts to turn. We need them to be our eyes and ears. We need to work collaboratively. Those things build relationships. And third, we have to solve crimes. We have one of the highest clearance rates in our crimes against persons division of anywhere in the country, and that's a product of relationships in our community. People have to trust us to know that they can contact us and we'll receive their information. We'll work their leads and bring justice to someone who was victimized. Those three things are an important piece. But there's a lot more that we've got to do. We've also got to be forward thinking about it. There are opportunities to create libraries of the hundreds upon hundreds of body-worn cameras video that we create each day. Examples of officers doing incredible acts of service, being calm in adrenaline-filled situations and de-escalating. These things don't ever make the news because they're not high profile, but they're still available. It's a product that we produce, and we should make it available to the public. Let them see the work that we're doing, particularly in their communities. I'm a huge fan of surveys. I think after action surveys, internal surveys, I think these things give us a really good perspective of how we're doing. I'd like to see our officers when they respond for calls for service and hand out a service sheet. I'd like them to also hand out a sheet that even has a link or a phone number where someone can call and tell us how we've done. One of the main things we need to do is we need to discontinue hotspot policing. We hear a lot of talk about going into areas where the data shows that we should be and that it's got an increase in violent crime. You can't just blanketly go into these areas without really looking behind the data to see what got us there in the first place, to see if that location even played a role in that crime in the first place. Our community, particularly our communities of color, minority communities, have spoken loud and clear. They don't want to feel over-policed, nor should they. We have models that occur in our city today that we could use in our African-American community, in our Latino community, where we go in and we don't necessarily need to go in and look for activity. We don't need to look for people doing something wrong. We just need to be in the area and be available. We need to let our community members know, hey, we're here and we're going to hold it down until 11 o'clock at night until my relief gets here. And in the meanwhile, if there's anything you need, this is my number. I'll be here. I'll be close by. That builds trust. That creates calmness, and that calmness resonates throughout our neighborhoods and our communities. And especially in a world where there's, people are inundated with stress, that needs to be part of the evolution of policing is relationship building, and that will build our trust.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Ramirez. Same question to former Deputy Chief Martinez. What do you believe is the best approach to building trust in the community between the police and the community?
Thank you, Gary. So like in every relationship, trust is built on fulfilling what you said you were going to do, to make sure that you're focused on strengthening that relationship, right? It's about trust. You have that trust bank between each other in persons. You also have that with the community for the department. We've talked a lot about collaboration and how we're going to reach out to the community. We met with different panels yesterday, and we were sincere in how we would connect with them as we look at whether we're creating ideas, concepts, plans, and operations, which are true. But we must make sure that we fulfill that promise that what we said we were going to do. What's also important is at the contact. We're looking at a global at a global level, but every officer makes daily contact with numerous residents and visitors in an act of service or a simple contact when they're going into the 7-Eleven or somewhere to eat or whatever the case may be. That is equally, if not more important, because they carry through the means and the reality of our message. I've created as a concept this fear the customer service. The customer service is serve professionally. What does serve professionally means? Means honor, being trustworthy, being committed to our service, understanding the core principles and values that we have. And at that moment in your act of service, whether it's a detective or an officer, you make sure you're serving professionally. At the same time, you're being empathetic. You're making sure you listen, you take the time to explain, as was mentioned about procedural justice, and you show that you care, and you must genuinely care. And at the end, you make sure that you are respecting the dignity of every fellow human being. one of the rules of policing is that you can take a person's freedom and liberty, but you can never take their dignity. And when you look at the complaints on our officers, many times it's about how somebody was made to feel because that officer did not execute his or her service in a proper professional way. They were not empathetic, and they lost the respect. And what's worse about that is our officers cause our department to lose respect, because what generally happens is the next officer that goes in service to that same location or dealing with those same residents and visitors, they take the brunt of the complaint because all they see is a uniform that showed up and they remember how they were treated in the previous past. My point to that is we're all connected together. Our community is connected to us. We are connected to the community because we're all one and the same. And as we talk about this global transparency, the main thing I want to talk about to capitalize on all of this is we keep focusing on our core principles and our core delivery of service. Our city management has the 4 E's: service first, about equity and excellence and empathy. And we move on forward trying to make sure that we align with those goals and in that act of service.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Martinez. Appreciate that. Okay, same question for Chief Garcia. What do you believe is the best approach of building trust between the police and the community?
Thank you, Gary. The late Martin Luther King Jr. said, men fear each other. Men hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. And they don't know each other because they don't talk. We in our beloved profession need to do a better job of communicating with our community and our communities of color and our communities that have felt disenfranchised by American law enforcement. And that's the reality. I'll get to Chief Brackney hit the nail on the head earlier, and I'll get to that towards the end. But as a police department, we need to be more transparent. You know, we need to stop hiding behind behind things that we would hide in the past. You know, in the city of San Jose, we were one of the first large police departments in the country, being the 10th largest city in the country that put our use of force statistics online. We put them online because we didn't need every year to have a story. Everybody can look online in the city of San Jose and you can see the force we've used, who we've used it against, and what part of the city we've been in. Well, you need to reach out to all of your community that feels disenfranchised. Our communities of color, absolutely, who have felt that way, and have conversations with them. Our homeless population that has felt that way. Our LGBTQ community that has felt that way in this country. In the city of San Jose, we established an LGBTQ committee that helped this department move the issues that are important to that community forward as we listen to all communities. We have a large immigrant population, both documented and undocumented, in the city of San Jose. That's another part of our communities that we talk about, that we may not talk about as often as we should, that know that there's a distrust that exists inside those communities in this police department, and we need them. We need them to report crimes. We need them to be witnesses of crimes, and we need to speak about that so they come forward. We need to do that, and we need to be personable about it. You know, as oftentimes, I'm not a stay in the office kind of chief. I've been around every corner of the city of San Jose, and I would do the same in Dallas. And I will tell you that there's not been a neighborhood that I have met that has not wanted fair policing in their neighborhoods. I have not met a neighborhood that's wanted less. And I've spoken to a lot of major chiefs around the country, and their perceptions are the same as mine, but they want fair policing. And we need to give them deliverables. And so we need to be transparent. We need to put things out there that we've done. We brought in, again, at the time, University of Texas El Paso, to come in and study the demographics of our car stops. We record the car stops and the pedestrian stops and the temporary handcuffing that we do on all of our individuals that reside in the city. Those are things that are public. Those are things that the public sees. We have oversight in the city of San Jose. That's incredibly important, and we embrace that. I embrace that because it gives the community a window into what the police department is doing. Because if we truly believe how noble our profession is, we have nothing to hide, and we will show our community that. And then finally, what I will say to Chief Brackney's point, we need to acknowledge that the stars and the badges that we wear so brightly and proud didn't always shine that way. We need to own up for the mistakes that we've made in American law enforcement. We've been here before, whether it be A few years ago, I watched the documentary The 13th on Netflix. And born out of that was a partnership with San Jose State University, where now every police recruit has to go through the negative history of American law enforcement. So that every police recruit now in the city of San Jose that goes out knows that just walking into a room with your badge and your uniform on does not gain you respect. That there is a reason that distrust exists, and we need to understand that. Because I would venture a guess, not many 21-year-olds as I was, and I've had almost 30 years in business, understood those complexities at the time. And so we need to understand where we've been, own up to those mistakes, and those are the ways we will continue to build trust in our communities.
Great. Thank you, Chief Garcia. Same question to Major Aziz.
Yes. First, we have to, understand from a favorite quote of mine, that's John C. Maxwell. He said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So let's start there as a foundation on building trust. And first, building trust, you first have to build a better officer, one who cares, one who understands the city and the department's history, their relationship that wasn't always so well here and across the nation. Need to understand de-escalation and implicit bias, and be well trained in especially Pillar 6 of 21st century policing that deals with officer wellness and safety. Adhere to those needs and meet those needs. Then we can move into what is real conceptual procedural justice from advocates and activists' point of view. And that is first, treat people with dignity and respect and give them a voice to tell their side of the story and make decisions based on the relevant facts instead of irrelevant factors, and act in a way that reassures people that we have their best interests at heart from that procedural justice standpoint. Then it allows us to do things we did before that build trust, like in transparency, posting our data on the website, like officer-involved shootings, as we were the second in the nation to do it behind Philadelphia. It means reformulation of community advisory meetings, making sure that they are up and running in every section of the city and that people are rotated through, as well as building individualism at each division and each unit, who should be out at every one of those community meetings instead of indirectly associated. Continue our solid programs that we have. From health and safety fairs should be implemented across all divisions, engaging in meaningful partnerships and faith-based partnerships, having a consistency in our town hall meetings, a quality of life town hall meetings, and partnering with NGOs and businesses and chambers, and talking about some things that I should mention here in just a minute, and all segments of the community. That means activists and advocates alike. And then we understand how we can get to 21st century policing as it is outlined under those pillars, that we can actually build trust, which is pillar number one, build trust and transparency. We should follow that. And how do we do that? Let's talk about what are things that we don't control and jobs and infrastructure. So you want to build trust, those socioeconomic factors that I mentioned earlier. Let's talk about job creation south of I-30, Dallas, Texas. Let's talk about viable youth programs and making sure that we do all we can to fund them with all of our business associates here in Dallas who should want for the southern sector where most problems are rising in violence. The in-school trade programs. We need to be with Dallas Independent School District, talking about building a better student who has a different idea of what success is, who may have a skill or a trade, or even young adult programs. A big one is violence interrupters. We need to employ violence interrupters around the nation. They've been successful across the nation in many cities like Chicago and Philadelphia and DC. Many places have put this in place. We need to make sure we have a viable restorative justice support in the schools and stop the school to prison pipelines. And I haven't even gotten to, we talking about what we'll do to reduce crime and how we'll do it. And then we need to support rehab and reentry programs that have often remained silent with non-support and understanding how these things will work. Now, how do we do those things? As I mentioned before, let's partner with our NGOs. We have a lot who get into the community that I've seen, from Faith in Texas to Urban Specialists to Next Gen. We partner with people. We need to really have a community come in who want to do ceasefire, not talk about it, because they've been asking to do it. They've been requesting to do it. and we should allow them to do it. And then how do we get it done? How do we reduce crime from a police perspective? We'll never arrest our way out of the crime problem. William Braden said it, and every other police chief in the nation has said it since. We need to re-implement the triangle strategy of person, places, and behaviors. But we also need to incorporate the intelligence information aspect, the enforcement aspect, and the investigations and community aspect, the community being the biggest one that those triangles revolve around. And in CompStat evolution, CompStat shouldn't be based upon anything other than crime, nothing else, no business interests, no other interests, no personnel interests. It's about crime. And that's what CompStat has always been about. And that's what we need to reinstitute it with evidence-based policing, intelligence-led policing, directed patrols, problem-oriented policing, community policing, CEPTED involved in that. And then we can meet the accurate and timely intelligence that it requires. We can meet the effective tactics that it requires. We can meet the rapid deployment, and we can meet the relentless follow-up and assessment that gets us to those points. Now, if we don't have all of those together, if we don't focus on all of those with all of our teams, then we won't be able to resolve violence in those communities as we try to build trust between us first with that acknowledgement.
Thank you, Major Aziz. You know, I want to step back for a minute because it was pointed out to me that I skipped Deputy Chief Martinez on the previous question. I apologize, Albert. So I'm going to give you the question right now, and then we're going to take a break afterwards. So Dallas is experiencing murders at a rate not seen in 16 years. What do you believe are the drivers of violent crime and strategies to reduce it? And then what would you change in the City of Dallas crime reduction strategy crime reduction plan?
Sure. Thank you, Gary. So as everybody mentioned, the biggest part of it with everything that drives violent crime, at the end of the day, it's our youth and our young adults who feel they have no hope. All those drivers that were mentioned, that is the ultimate result. They have no hope. They have no support, broken homes. So here's the law enforcement where we're trying to make an impact in different ways. So my primary strategy to reduce our violent crime on day one is assigning 24 officers back to our division commanders, our patrol commanders. We have 7 stations. Each one is like its own police department, and giving them those 24 officers as a discretionary resource to start impacting crime immediately. My career has been defined by chasing the decision-making carrot. Every time I went up the rank, it seemed like the decision-making ability, the responsibility, and the authority was taken away to the next level. Including when I was a deputy chief, it just felt like it kept getting pulled away. So in my administration, we're going to decentralize, and we're going to take centralizing authority away. I'm going to share my power, my authority with my deputy chiefs, because that's how you hold them accountable, when you give them the power and the authority. Going to discontinue our violent crime task force because it's a centralized operation. I don't see it being necessary. And giving that back to the deputy chiefs at the patrol station. Our stations are vast in geography. They're different in population, and everybody has different needs. So our commanders will move swiftly on that. And we also have the Dallas Online Reporting System. It's a system that needs to be expanded in what it can capture and how it's used. I've tried to use it myself 4 times since being at the diocese, and 4 times I've been rejected. That needs to change. And then, of course, increasing our phone expediters. And I know that's already happening. So, but I'm going to use my power to push that much faster because we need to start on day one. But to go a little bit more long term, and I'll finish it up with this, is that our apartment complexes, we need to increase our risk team. Our risk team is actually nuisance abatement. I oversaw risk, the risk unit, and we need to increase that. It's an overwhelming job, and we need that to be expanded. We need to do our CEPTED site surveys, which is crime prevention through environmental design, to really hold our problem apartment complexes accountable, and to teach our apartment complexes, sort of as the Northeast Division did, to teach our apartment complexes how to find reputable vendors and not just find somebody that is giving them a cheap deal. And finally, one of the pieces, I would turn to our city council, and I would be asking for an ordinance that would allow us to hold the apartment complexes' feet to the fire. Sales, before they can sell their property, depending on certain sizes of the apartment complexes, because of the density and the crime that happens there, that they have a playground or some type of basketball court or a small soccer square that allows our children to be able to play inside their apartment complex. We have too many apartment complexes in Dallas that have no available recreation area for the children. Often when we patrol through those apartment complexes, they're actually playing in parking lots. And let's require them to have a written safety plan of how their apartment complex operates so that we can post that on our website. And also a self-investment security plan. How do they have that plan in their apartment complex so that we can post that on our website as well? And finally, what we're going to do in the department is actually every division will post at least 50 second chance employers, and we'll put that on our website. And we're also going to give our officers baseball cards when they interact in a traffic stop or any setting when somebody's talking about how no one will hire them because they just got out of penitentiary or jail. We're going to help them. We're going to point the way to these, what will end up being about 350 second chance employers available to them to get a job, to bring back hope, to bring back opportunity and success for them as well. And finally, we need to impact our schools. We need to be inside DISD and charter schools, but especially DISD, to collaborate with them and can we help them tutor the kids? How can we do virtual tutoring? These are things that we can get started on day one. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Martinez. And again, I apologize for skipping over you. So at this time, it's 3:40 Central Time. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Turn your screens off, attend to whatever necessities you need to, and then we'll reconvene at 3:45.
Hey Dallas, I'm Catherine Cuellar, Director of Communications for the City of Dallas. We're in this together to stop COVID-19. Remember, get tested, wear a mask, wash your hands, avoid crowds. Thank you, and let's stay on guard, Dallas.
Deferred maintenance on homes can often be one of the things that stresses a family out. Budgets are thin always. As we go through a pandemic, those budgets are stretched even further. HIP is one of many of our programs that fall under housing preservation. It's a series of programs and initiatives meant to assist residents who need home repair, whether it's a targeted nature or general repairs, to make sure that they feel safe, their families feel safe in the house that they live in. So they're here today to turn in their applications to apply for the program. Many of these applicants have significant repairs that they need to have happen to their home. So every year we have funding from the Housing and Urban Development, sometimes our home program as well, to offer forgivable loans to applicants who need home repair. They can get everything that is structural and health and safety, so foundation repair, siding and cladding, roofing, doors and windows. We do interior repairs as well, major gas and plumbing, electric, pretty much everything that needs to be repaired on a home.
I did have a small fire in the kitchen. We did rebuild the kitchen walls and stuff. The sink is not attached because there's no cabinets. They burned. There's no hot water because it was a gas fire. I do have a stove, but I can't cook because it's between the washer and the dryer. There's only one plug
Programs like this mean a tremendous amount to people. So I'm lucky to get to work on a program like this and happy to continue to work with residents to inform their programs on what their needs are and then be able to apply the funding that we have in the most efficient and effective way possible.
The City of Dallas now has a Dallas 311 Alexa skill that can be easily enabled by telling any Amazon Alexa-enabled device, "Alexa, enable the Dallas 311 skill." Once the Dallas 311 skill is enabled, just ask "Alexa, open Dallas 311" to check the status of a service request, learn a Dallas City Council member's name and the date of the next City Council meeting, view weekly trash pickup and recycling days, or stay up to date on COVID-19 testing locations and other resources. Download and enable the Dallas 311 skill from Google Play or the App Store to use with a smartphone or any Amazon Alexa-enabled device today. The Dallas 311 Amazon Alexa skill is another way the City of Dallas is expanding resident access to services. Download it today.
We're ready to reconvene. So let me know when it's a go.
We're ready.
Thank you. Okay, we're back to the public interview forum. We're going to continue with another question. This time we'll start with Chief Moore. There's a community perception that the police department is resistant to change and views any attempts at change with suspicion. At the same time, officers have expressed their concern that they do not believe they have the support of the command staff and that they'll be hung out to dry if they make a mistake. How will you manage these competing interests when leading the department?
So as it relates to change, I'm pretty sure I'm safe in this statement. Across the nation, police officers don't like change. They don't like status quo. So I believe it's just how you package that message. Being here for 30 years, honestly, the department I started with and the department it is today, there's been evolution throughout. So police officers do accept change. Again, it's just how you package it to them. So my idea is the word transparent. You know, you had a lot of talk about transparency to the public. You owe that same transparency level to your troops. The reason they're suspicious many times is because they've never been listened to. I believe that officers are some of the brightest people and they have good ideas. So if you want to win them over and submit change and actually implement change, give them the professional courtesy of listening to. And I think they will accept change from that perspective. The second part of your question, Gary?
How will you manage the competing interests, the officers that don't think you support them?
That's easy. Showing value, saying thank you. The Dallas Police Department has some of the hardest working officers, I would say, in the country. And a simple thank you goes a long way. An email that says, "Hey, good job today, guys. Awesome recovery of guns, awesome recovery of drugs." That simple thank you changes the mind of every officer. Every person innately likes to feel appreciated. They like to feel valued. And that's the easiest way to do that. Again, value, thank you. And of course, it has to be genuine, especially if you respond at 2 and 3 in the morning. That blows officers away. They send you, hey, this is what we did, and you send back, outstanding job, guys. You build them up, and that's how you win them over. The third part of your question?
I think that was it.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Moore. Chief Brackney, the same question. You mean to repeat it, or do you have it?
No, I have the question in front of me. The community's perception is no different than the officer's perception about change and what we can do with change. The reason most people are resistant to change is because they've been excluded from the process. They don't have any input. No one has asked them about the change and how it might impact them individually, particularly when it comes from command staff level. There's the assumption that there was no consideration for them. And it normally is correct because you haven't considered them in the process. Often may not necessarily be out of arrogance, but of just trying to get something or a process done. What you need to do is you have to open up access to the command staff and that decision making. And here's what I've done to do that in Charlottesville and would do it in Dallas. Our command staff meetings, we post the agenda and we put that out for all the officers to see that what our command staff meetings are going to be about. Our supervisory meetings, we do the exact same thing. And not only do we post the agenda, we actually take minutes and then disseminate those out throughout the entire agency. So we're not doing things behind closed door with the exception of personnel issues. When you have minutes that are being disseminated out, you can then get feedback from the officers. And then they talk about that as well. It's not just giving them a document and then they have that. We now have a command advisory group. And these were officers who were selected across the entire organization, as well as our non-sworn personnel. We often just think of our organization strictly by the sworn personnel, but our civilian personnel who support us in ways, they have this command advisory where they can talk about the issues that are going on in our police department, and not only what they believe the problems are, they provide solutions as well. And then we walk back and forth as to what we could do to support those solutions. When you think about balancing those competing priorities between what the community wants and what the community says that they need from us, the officers think that they're going to be hung out to dry, and the community are often calls for their demands for those officers to be terminated or fired without any real negotiations or even thoughts about what is occurring here. When you have officers who believe they're not going to be supported, they may realize on a daily basis they're supported, but they don't want to be the sacrificial lamb for your career because they've made a mistake. So how do you then balance that need? Once again, it's the exact same thing. When there have been these public issues, public-facing issues, how have you handled that? Have you gone out and dealt with that? Have you also done community or surveys, climate surveys within your own organization and asked that question? And we asked that question in our own organization. Part of our survey was, how do you feel the command staff would support you? Do you feel they would support you? Get that information from them in advance to know that where it is, and then where that data can be collected. And more importantly, once you have that data, do something with it. Do you publish that back to your teams to say, this is how the rank and file feel about command and feel about the chief? Climate and culture surveys are extremely important, and we never do those often within our organization. We will survey the community about how they feel about us, but we never take that internal survey to get a representation of how our own organization even views or perceives us and access.
Great.
So those things I've actually done and not things I would do.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Same question for Deputy Chief Ramirez.
Thank you. So I think a lot of what we're saying is really similar. It's just kind of getting back to the human component of what it is we do and everything we do. Everyone wants to be respected. Everyone wants to be heard, and we absolutely need to be people who want to hear it. First off, I would say that our police department, like many, we're very traditional, and so I can see the perception that we're resistant to change, but I think our police department and many others deserve a lot of credit for the amount of change that we've actually been through in such a short time. Policing is is moving faster than it ever has in the past. It's moving right underneath our feet. The way we police today is not the way we policed 6-8 months ago. It's continually changing. And so I think our police officers deserve a lot of credit for adjusting. I think when I was in internal affairs as a division commander, I had to make a lot of tough decisions that the rank and file didn't like and the association heads didn't like. But what I found was that taking that few extra minutes to sit there with them and explain exactly what it is that went into the finding and the decision making and the diligence that was put in to that result really went a long way to put them in position as really elected over those union groups to go in and explain it to their membership. And that solved a lot of our problems. And I think that's just a model that we keep echoing today, is that we've really got to take the time to focus on the human component. In policing, we're excellent in the mechanics of policing. We have great technique, great training, but we could all stand to really reconnect to those values that really we were founded on, which is just service and treating each other with dignity and respect and giving those same types of treatments that we want in exchange. And lastly, I'll say that it's incredibly important for that perception that officers will feel like they're hung out to dry. First and foremost, we have to have outstanding command staff. We have to, without exception. We have to have people who model the behavior that we want for the culture of our police department, that embody the evolution that I mentioned earlier about relationship building. And they have to be competent. I heard a story recently written about what is required to be the police chief of Dallas, and whether it requires somebody who's hands-on and understands the inner workings of crime and investigations and operations, or more administrative. This is Dallas, Texas. I think we deserve both. And I think our rank and file and our community deserve a command staff that is equally equipped. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Ramirez. Same question for Deputy Chief Albert Martinez.
Thank you, Gary. So as been mentioned, what's the compelling interest? I don't think that we're that far apart. You know, every spectrum has its ends where they are far apart. But overall, between our officers that reflect the community and the community reflecting our officers, the majority are not that far apart. The compelling interest is our goal is to really, as was mentioned, the resistance comes because we don't explain the why internally. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? And what happens in that miscommunication, rumor takes it away. It's almost like being on Nextdoor. Next thing you know, in 3 or 4 posts in Nextdoor, it goes away, and it was aliens that came into the neighborhood or something like that and took away somebody. So it just spins out of control, and that happens internally. Sometimes it's interesting how officers complain about the public, our citizenry, our residents and visitors, when internally we're doing the same thing based on rumor and assumptions and such. But the main point is that our command staff and myself must explain what is going on, why we're doing it. I agree completely in having them involved in decision making. Part of our command staff meetings, my goal is that we have that available to them so that they know what we're talking about. Many of our conversations in the command staff meetings are about policy and procedure and crime reduction and as well as what else we can do, but it also centers around our staff, our officers and our non-sworn staff. There's a lot of consideration that takes place. We just don't relay that to them. And that's something that they have to understand. And we can show them how we're having those conversations regarding them, as well as getting their input. I agree with the having you use surveys. We have put out surveys before. I don't think we put out enough of them, just like we don't do enough with the community. Ultimately, what is necessary so that people understand what we're trying to do is simply explain it, take the time to document it, and let's go out and explain it to not only the public in some of our policies and procedures so that they're aware of what we're doing, but also internally, and what are the benefits of it. Sometimes our officers see the change, but they don't realize the benefits, just like with body-worn camera. Many of our complaints, I think we get around 25 external complaints a week out of probably a million direct contacts every year. And that's about 1,250 complaints external. And our officers, a lot of times, have also been able to be exonerated by their body-worn camera. And you have officers who initially were resistant, really start embracing that body-worn camera and they use it to their advantage. And it also affects their performance as they show to be more professional, more empathetic, more respectful, because they're very aware of that magnification in their service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Chief Garcia, there's a community perception that the police department is resistant to change and views any attempts at change with suspicion. At the same time, the officers have expressed their concern that they do not believe they'll have the support of the command staff and they might be hung out to dry. How, if they make a mistake, how will you manage these competing interests and lead the department successfully?
You know, I think a lot has been said already, so I'll try to be succinct, but I will tell you is that our rank and file need to feel, it's easy for us to say they're stakeholders, they need to feel that they're stakeholders in this process. The command staff on down need to feel they're stakeholders in this process. And in San Jose, what I have done in the last 5 years is you have to embed yourself there. You have to be present. You have to show up to briefings. You have to go show up to stations. If you're not there, you need to have your command staff at stations. They need to know that they matter. You need to champion the efforts. I'm sure the men and women of the Dallas Police Department are amazing men and women that do an amazing job and sacrifice a lot, just like a lot of the departments around the country. And you need to champion that. You need to ensure that they know that although you have two goals, that you're here to make our community safer, and some of that means taking the criminal element off the street, and the other goal, which is just as important, is you're here to build strong community relationships. And if you tell that to your rank and file and tell them those two concepts are not mutually exclusive, there is a way to build strong community trust and at the same time doing the job of keeping communities safe, and you can do that. And if officers and staff see that you're truly committed to them, truly committed to that mission, they'll be on board. I'll tell you what, from a personal level, for myself, one of the main things is to gain the respect of the rank and file. If that's myself going out to stations, going on rides with patrol officers, talking to them so that they know that they matter, that they know that they are if I'm fortunate enough for this position, that they're the most valuable asset we have to ensure the safety of the residents of Dallas. When it comes to be treated fairly, listen, procedural justice has to occur inside an organization in order for it to occur outside an organization. The men and women that do this are lucky enough to do this profession need to be treated fairly when a moment of crisis hits. It doesn't matter what type of reform or oversight you have, it has to be seen as fair, because we don't want our officers sitting behind a coffee shop waiting behind a 911 call, waiting for a 911 call for service. We need our officers being proactive out on the street. We need our officers taking criminals off of our streets. We need our officers taking criminals in possession of guns off our streets and narcotics off our streets. And the only way they're going to do that is if they feel that when they are in crisis, that they are going to be treated fairly. And the community needs to know that the community is going to be treated fairly when crisis hits. So it goes both ways. And the more experience you have, as I have had, in the 5 years I've been chief, if officers feel that they're being treated fairly and the community feels that the process is fair, then neither side suffers from the lack of proactivity from officers. And those are the directions that have been successful for us and have been successful for our community.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. Major Aziz, same question.
Yes, let me address it from two perspectives. And the first perspective being from the community who feel like we have been resistant to change. And that resistance to change comes with an acknowledgement that we need to acknowledge the truth, the reality, and then the perception of the reality, which is reality within itself. And that's what we fail to do with the community. Now, let's look at where the complaints come from. On the biggest things that has gotten us on the stage to this day, they have been, we'll use Campaign Zero as an example. And Campaign Zero talks about 8 things on 8 can't wait. Now, Dallas Police Department can go through this history because, number one, they talk about banning chokeholds and strangleholds. We did that in the 80s. We did away with LVNR in 2005 or 6. We require de-escalation. We've been doing de-escalation since 2013. We did reasonable alternatives before then. Another issue that they have on that is the use of force continuum. We've exercised the use of force continuum or managed response, as we say now, since I came on. Before that, we had use of continuum. So with the 8 items that Campaign Zero lay out and the issues that have plagued other departments around the nation, some of the other 18,000 departments that have affected 800,000 officers across this nation, then we've done them. So what has been our issue with building trust and addressing the need that they say is a resistance to change? It is our consistency of the message to let the community know exactly what we're doing. So we need to incorporate the history into police training sessions with the community and explain our history of policing and our relationship between Dallas Police and its city. And that is a very real relationship that is plagued with some malicious things that have happened since 1881. That acknowledgement comes with that. The truth comes with that. Then we need to deliver the same message that we deliver to the community that we're delivering to the officers. And they need to understand that on both sides. Now we'll work with the community on dealing with the issues inside the police departments. For instance, we have a simulation machine that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, but the community needs to come and utilize that and see what we go through and see how they view things from a police perspective. Just make sure you have a well-trained officer who spends 37 weeks in an academy. Well, we need to build the bridges. When we talk about that resistance to change, then every group operates in a different capacity. And the different capacity is Latinos, Blacks, Asians, LGBTQ community, the rich, the poor, across demographics across the city. And we have a message to address that resistance to change with the police department in the eyes that they view it from. That's their perspective in the world paradigm that they see. So we'll bring it back and do the work that we did before, like the work that we did in the Asian Trade District in Northwest that built relationships. And we were talking about changing those. Every avenue we have to talk about what we've done with the police department, which enabled them to give 10 scholarships every year. The LGBTQ community, the biggest being in the Oak Lawn area, and how we were able to break down the barriers, whether night or day, and address some of the hate crime issues, or like I did when I gave the officer to intelligence to learn detective work. That broke down barriers, or even changing our community policing meetings to Spanish, translating English to Spanish in those brochures in the Crime Watch meetings. That breaks down barriers so we can talk about change. The police side is an ugly truth. We need to acknowledge that, yes, there has been a no support from command at times. We can't deny that there's been a different set of rules for commanders. There's been a different set of rules for officers, and the officers can see that. They're not blind. So we have to acknowledge those things. So we have to hold all levels accountable, not just police, but every supervisor level we have. We need to build the supervisor with training and education, give them what they need to do the job. We have the smartest men and women in policing, and then we need to hold all ranks accountable. There shouldn't be 3 different sets of rules that we go by. The reviewing of the issues need to be swift. Like when something comes to your attention, we should be able to address it swiftly and not let it linger on. Like sometimes we've done over the years when IAD has been 2 and 3 years behind on an investigation. Then that's why officers are saying they have no support from command, because we haven't pushed these things along. So if we haven't addressed the underlying issues of inequity, then we have failed officers on that side, so they should be saying the truth. We need to deliver the same message to them that I've talked about delivering to the community, and open pathways for them to get to you, not just in the community with emails and ask the chief and telephones. Then we know we need to do that with officers. Open door policy, go into detail, being available, and not always talking about crime. Let's talk about some family. Let's talk about some personal situations. Let's just talk about life in general. And then finally, Pillar 6 needs to be implemented. If we care about the wellness and safety of officers, then we need to deliver that to them and stop talking about it. And we need to be about it. And we won't have this kind of dialogue. So we'll find a common ground message to build upon.
Thank you, Major Aziz. Next up, Chief Spivey. Do you need the question?
No, I've got it, Gary. Thank you.
Okay.
So let me talk about what I've done as Chief of Police to address change and the resistance to change, and then also how we built trust within our organization, specifically around being transparent around the purpose behind the changes that we're making. So one of the first things we did, or let me back up. One of the things that I continue to do, because I learned from my predecessor, was we host quarterly meetings with all of our staff. Once a quarter, a schedule goes out. We cover different days, different times of day, so that we allow people from all shifts to attend these meetings with me, the chief of police. There is no agenda. You don't have to submit questions ahead of time. We'll actually pay you overtime if you're off duty and you want to come in and attend the meeting. You come in if you have some complaint, if you have some idea, if you have some issue or some question that you haven't been able to get addressed through your chain of command, or you haven't felt comfortable addressing through your chain of command, that's an open forum. We do that once a quarter. Once all of those meetings are complete, if I can answer the question during the meeting, I answer the question. If I have to go back and do some research or talk to commanders about why we're doing certain things or why we're not doing certain things, I then get back to them with the answer. But all of those notes from those meetings, all of those questions and all of those answers then goes out department-wide. So whether you attended the meeting or not, whether you were interested or not, you get to see the questions and you get to see my responses to that. The second thing we've done, we've implemented is a folder on our network drive. And so every staff meeting, the minutes from those staff meetings goes into that folder. Every crime update goes into that folder. In any specific news related to the department goes in that folder. We send a link out to every employee every 2 weeks so that they can go to that folder and they can see what's happening around our police department. And then one of the, I think, most impactful changes that we've made is specifically to address the suspicion of change has been anytime we're going to change a policy, anytime we're going to adopt a new policy, once that policy is drafted, once it's been vetted by my command staff, we send that policy out to every supervisor in the organization to allow them to read over the policy, give us feedback, make sure that we're not missing something, make sure that there's not some detail, not some procedure that's going on where this policy will impact the way we do our business. We wait for that feedback to come back. Once that feedback is returned, we review it. If the policy is still sound, is still solid, and still is the direction we want to go, we implement that policy. Now, I'll talk about building trust, because if you're not demonstrating that you're trustworthy, you're never going to build trust. We got ahead of ourselves one time. I had a policy drafted, vetted it through our command staff. We had a number of policies going to go out at that time. I neglected to send that policy out to every supervisor to get their feedback. The policy went out, it was put in place, and immediately got pushback on the policy. One, the supervisors had become accustomed to getting to vet those policy changes. Two, there was some issues with the policy and the way it was written and would cause problems with the way we actually did work. When that feedback came back to me, I immediately rescinded the policy, went back to work, corrected those deficiencies, sent that policy then back out to the supervisors, ended up implementing the policy. But again, it helped build that trust. It wasn't, the chief is going to send this policy out only when it's convenient for him. Made the mistake, corrected it, and we moved forward.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. Next question we're going to start with Chief Brackney. A large part of your success rests on the people that you surround yourself with. If selected, what would be your approach in selecting an executive staff? Those that help you make decisions each day. What roles do you deem necessary? Will they be civilian or officer roles? And how will you leverage your team to manage the entire department?
So thank you for that question. I'm sure every person in Dallas, and particularly within that police department, is concerned about what does that team look like. In policing and other businesses, nepotism, friendships often influence team building, and that can be a detractor. It detracts from your credibility, it detracts from your ability to be successful. So let me talk to you about what I did in Charlottesville to build a team. I mean, this is really a great tool when you're an external candidate so that you can neutralize those institutional friendships and relationships and then be able to be successful. The way I built the team here and my command staff was the first thing I did was ask each of the leaders who were currently in the organization and then across the organization, every member, to identify their personal and what they thought the organizational successes were. We did a SWOT analysis. What were their organization and personal strengths, weaknesses, opportunities within the organization, and threats to the organization. I then purchased Strength Finders 2.0 for every single officer so that I could then marry their knowledge, their skills, and abilities with those police services we said we were going to deliver. In the organizational chart, I removed every name from the organizational chart and identified what the qualities and the skills that were needed for that position currently as it stood. And then you marry those officers, leaders, positions, and with that, those skills, knowledge, and abilities. What you then do is you take the name off of it, you take the relationships off of it, and you then put the people in place who can drive the organizational philosophies forward. You then also position everyone for success because they're working within their strengths and not against their weaknesses. And then you determine if there's, you can civilianize those positions. We typically will have these positions within our organization in which we are forcing officers like squares into a round peg to do something, whether it's the finance or the technology division, and that's not where their skill set lies. Well, if that's what they're not hired to do, feel free to open that up and civilianize it. And that's what I've done. An entire branch I've civilianized. It then gives opportunities for other persons to come into your organization. You can employ differently as well. When I also have done is when I've done my policing priorities, those were set by the combination of what the city's strategic plan was and where they aligned with our policing priorities. And they had never married the two. It was strictly the city would often have its vision, and then the police department had its own, and never overlapping, understanding that we received our moral and legal authority from the communities that we actually served. Creating diversity. Now, within your ranks and within those positions, we often just think merely of the demographics, race, gender, religion, ethnicity. What I think about too is recruiting diversity differently and putting that inside of your team. Diversity of thought, diversity of experiences, diversity of even just the opportunities within their organization and what they've been exposed to across the entire organization. Once you promote and prioritize based on skills, knowledge, ability, once you hire and create your team, you then give them the opportunity to be groomed and empowered. So they are operating in their strengths. You're all working and firing off the same cylinder. You're all on the same page of music, and then you're moving forward. And again, these are approaches that are best practice across all industries, but we very seldom employ them in our policing profession at all. So thank you, Gary, for that answer or that question.
Thank you, Dr. Brackney. Okay, same question for Deputy Chief Ramirez.
So selecting a command staff, but first and foremost, one of my strongest skill sets is assessing talent. It's something I've always been able to do, and working with this police department for 25 years, I've worked with the men and women in this police department for so long that I know exactly what the strengths and weaknesses are, particularly of our command staff. And it'd be my responsibility to make sure that I put those commanders in areas to work towards their strengths so that they can lead at a higher level based on those strengths, and just make those necessary adjustments. Again, I think this command staff is strong. I think there's a lot of key players. I don't think they're all in the right places, but those types of adjustments are absolutely necessary. I'm not looking for loyalty as much as I'm looking for ability. And again, modeling behavior for our officers and the community. As it relates to civilianization, I think that that's really a critical piece of our involvement moving forward. We have to have civilianization. We need to continue to recognize that we have blind spots in policing. And often when we're all products of 20, 30, 40 years, making decision from that lens, it creates even bigger blind spots, and we've got to prevent that. We work for non-sworn. We work for civilians, so I want civilians in my command staff and on our team. Was there another part of that question, Gary?
Yeah, how will you leverage the entire team to manage the department?
Well, again, it's making sure that we have civilian or non-sworn in those areas that really don't need to be sworn positions outside of investigations and patrol and the technology, the communications, open records, recruiting. We have so many brilliant minds in this city, in the academia world and in the business world. I would be looking to find someone in the academia world that was really versed on training, 21st century model training, real-time, up-to-date trainings that we could bring to our police department and give our officers those opportunities to grow their resumes, to grow their skill sets, over technology. Get innovative and creative about bringing those tools into our police department to give our officers an opportunity to win against the call loads that they're up against and the caseloads that they're up against. We arguably wouldn't get that if we only used sworn personnel who've been a product of this police department, this city, all their entire career. So we have to bring specialists, and I would be looking for them within Dallas, Texas, because again, we have so many really brilliant minds within our community.
Great. Thank you, Deputy Chief Ramirez. Deputy Chief Martinez, same question.
Okay, thank you, Gary. So in looking at how would I approach selecting the command staff, we do have a robust group of commanders from lieutenant on up, and I would be looking at asking for their resumes, and we would be looking at their services. One of the things that we don't track well in the department is what positions have you had in the past that a chief can look at. We don't have a system that does that very well. So the reason for the resume is to get a complete focus of where they've been. And obviously you have to assess their knowledge, their skills, their abilities, and what they bring to the table. I obviously have relationships with many of our commanders, if not all of them, throughout my career. So I also know what they bring to the table. But this also leads us into a very robust, very deliberate discussion about their abilities and what we're looking for. It's also valuable to me to have that sit down with them to understand their outlook, their viewpoints. The very topics that we've been talking about today would be very much part of the interview in how have they collaborated, what have they done? Because again, most of us as commanders, we don't have a chance to really have deliberate conversations with each other on what we're trying to do. So as I take that, and I'm looking here at the next part of the question is, well, what roles do you deem are necessary? I certainly believe that bringing in outside talent is also important, especially for civilians. I feel that, especially in law enforcement, we're very insular or incestuous, if you will, because we don't start looking at the outside opportunities or the outside thinking. I see us bringing in outside experts that are strong in their fields, either to train us or to also join the department to help us better how we do things. What we often do is start bringing in other officers in specialized roles, thinking that they've got the answer because they've been there, done that. But there are stronger experts out there that can really help us and make our challenge, make us be able to see our challenge in a different perspective. And that's something that the community is asking for. And then finally, to the final part of the question is, well, how do you leverage the team? I am a very strong team builder. I have been doing that in my career with the Dallas Police Department for years, 6.5 years as a deputy chief, and putting these teams together where I challenge them with the vision, but also encourage their heart, make sure that I'm modeling the way, and the team can do it. And our city really needs a strong team. When we've talked about all these other topics about the operational plan and our strategic plan, well, it takes a team, and having that robust team is what's going to give us success. And then we'll be able to take on other challenges and opportunities. As was mentioned a while ago, being strong, observing our weaknesses, and then taking on these opportunities and threats so that we can be successful, not just for us in the department, but for the city as a whole.
Great. Thank you, Deputy Chief Martinez.
Thank you, Gary.
Certainly. Chief Garcia, what would your approach be to selecting an executive staff? And what roles would you deem necessary? And will it be civilian or officer roles? And then how will you leverage and manage that team?
Thanks, Gary. Well, first of all, particularly myself and several others that are from the outside, one of the things that we will look at that's missing from is that the relationship part, the nepotism part coming in, not to say you can't overcome that if you're from the organization, but certainly that's something that I would bring in, that I'm interested in ability. I'm interested in what you've done. One of the things that I would sit down with my command staff and say, you had DPD had a plan, and I think we've discussed the plan that the former Chief Hall had. And regardless what the thinking of the plan was, that was the plan at the time. What did you do individually for success? What did you do individually for Chief Hall's plan to succeed? How did you message that to your rank and file? Because there was a plan. And what you did is very important, because at the end of the day, we're all a team. Your success, my success, is the success of the department, it's the success of the men and women. And so I would certainly ask exactly what benefit did they have to particularly the crime reduction plan? What do they do to move that forward? Since that is the biggest issue facing the city of Dallas. What did you do? And then after that, then talk to individuals below them, their subordinates, and ask, how did they manage? Because oftentimes as chiefs, and this has happened in San Jose, is oftentimes we get too carried away with the result and don't spend any time in figuring out exactly how they got it accomplished. How did they get it accomplished at the expense of our men and women? That's something that we need to look at. And that's something that I would take into account. Obviously, diversity is very important. In San Jose, and one thing we'd like to do, I'd like people around the table that have different points of view. That diversity reflects not only the city, but the department as well. That's going to be important also. And so we'll look at all that, and that's the way I would structure my command staff. I have a few posters in my office. But one poster in my office is make sure you know everybody in your boat is rowing and not drilling holes when you're not looking. And so I want to make sure that command staff, when we have a mission, we have goals, and collectively we will achieve those goals for the betterment of the residents of Dallas and the men and women of the DPD. Certainly, civilianization is something that's important. We usually, in law enforcement, we are sometimes a little reticent to look outside our profession, but I think it's ultimately important to bring new eyes that are not necessarily sworn, that can give us a new look. And certainly we look at positions to do that. I am for civilianization. For some, we need our police officers doing what police officers do. And in San Jose, we have civilianized. In San Jose, we don't have the luxury. We are the largest police department in this country. We're the 10th largest city in the country with the leanest police department. I've never had the luxury of being able to throw police officers at problems. I've needed great leadership to have the men and women of this police department believe in them to get things accomplished. And so together, collectively, the way we would leverage is to let my command staff know. I thought we're fortunate to get the position to know that we're in this together. Your success is my success. I've been the police chief or the executive assistant in the 10th largest city in the country for 8 years. And that I want you to succeed. That one of my goals is to ensure that the next leader of the Dallas Police Department comes from this department. That would be one of my goals. And collectively, we can accomplish that together if we're all in the same boat and we're all rowing in the same direction.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. Chief Spivey, same question.
One of the first things that you have to do as an outsider coming into an organization is evaluate the people that are already in place. Do they complement your weaknesses? Do they enhance your strengths? Are they going to help you be the leader that you've told the people of the city of Dallas, you've told the leadership at the city of Dallas that you can be? You need those people working just as hard as you are to help you be successful. And so I'm going to evaluate the talent that's already there. Do they fill the voids where I need? Do they help me in the areas that I'm already strong? I don't need a bunch of Jeff Spiveys on my command staff. I need individuals, both men and women, who have diverse experiences, diverse upbringings, diverse educational backgrounds, diverse knowledge and diverse skills. And so I'm gonna evaluate who's there. If that team is already in place and we can step in and immediately go to work, then I think that's what's best for the organization. If I need to go down into the organization to find those individuals, then I will. We'll do an interview process. I'll try to find the best fit for the position, whether it's the executive level assistant chief, whether it's an assistant chief, a deputy chief, a major, whatever that looks like, wherever that need exists, I'm going to find those people, I'm going to put them in place. Now, I think leveraging the supervisory staff of any organization, we tend to only focus on that command level. We tend to only focus on the executive level in developing that. And we lose sight of the importance of a first line supervisor. And certainly in policing, I believe that if you can get the hearts and the minds of the first line supervisor on board with where you're going with the organization, then nothing can stop you, because the men and women that they're leading, those are the men and women who are actually out there doing the job. They're the boots on the ground. They're the ones taking the chances, and they need to know what the executives are doing. They need to know what the plan is that the executives have come up with while they sit around the conference tables and have those conversations. If they can't get bought into what you're doing, to the direction that you're going, you can have the best command staff that money could buy, whether they're civilian or whether they're police officer, it wouldn't matter. What you need to do is ensure that those first line supervisors are bought in, that they understand where you're trying to take the organization, and they're communicating effectively to the men and women who are actually out there doing the work. And so that as I've done that, as I took over the Irving Police Department, one of the things I did right off the bat is I bought a copy of the book, It's Your Ship, for every supervisor within the organization. And I had them read that. And then we did supervisory training based on the concepts of that book. And the purpose behind that was, we all have roles and responsibilities within an organization. And if we just sit around and wait for somebody to tell us what to do, we're going to ultimately fail. And so by reading that book, by incorporating those concepts into our organization, I set the vision and the mission for the department. You know what your role is within the organization. You don't wait to be told. You go do it. And that's that empowerment that makes, whether you're a command level officer or whether you're a first line supervisor, or you're the person out there doing the work, you know what's expected of you. You know that you have the autonomy to go out there and do the job. And with that kind of energy around our police department, we're unstoppable.
Thank you, Chief Spivey. Appreciate that. Major Aziz, if you're selected, what would your approach be to selecting your executive staff?
Yeah. Well, let me give, part of what I believe is the plan, the leveraging, and the system in which we exist, now, or how we will exist. The first day, I'll take a note from some of my mentor chiefs, and who said, start with your identifying 3 high-ranking officials who can take your place if you need to leave. And so we need to think along those lines. So that'll start with one-on-one interviews with each of the command staff members. We will require resumes from each member that outlines in a matrix what has been your assignments, what has been your length of stay, what has been your contributions into your assignments and your rank time. We'll glean ideas from each of them for their contribution from the department and to the community. I'm going to assess each member for upper command appointments, and then we're going to have panel interviews for each position in the major and deputy chief ranks from myself. Command staff selections are made among 4 things, and that's competency across demographics, loyalty, and mandated, meaning above you. And the best of those is what I said in 2001 is qualified diversity, when I wrote the article, Qualified Diversity. And so we need to look at those from those angles on what you actually bring to the table, or did you just show up to eat? Now, let's look at leveraging the team for management. We'll utilize surveys in the work groups from people that will work for you. We'll provide continuous leadership training and education to command staff, which is something we've gotten away from. We'll read and CPI, Caruth Police Institute, they used to do the sessions with us with 15-minute books that meant a lot to the development of command staff. We'll reinstall the executive retreats that we used to have on a quarterly basis that built commanders and gave useful information and leadership training and education. We need to get back into making sure that we utilize our schools and police, Caruth Police Institute, FBI National Academy, and Senior Management Institute of Police, as well as locally with the Institute for Law Enforcement Administration, which is in our own backyard also. So establishing the qualifying criteria for moving forward to appointing positions will not be something that is kept in the secret or kept in the dark. And if you put in a resume for that for qualifying criteria, then you will be interviewed. We owe you that kind of respect to at least interview you and see what you bring to the table. And we're going to expose the command staff to many situations as needed. Many commanders in the past have been developed enough to even understand the function of an emergency operations center or a command post or incident command systems. So we need to rebuild that infrastructure. We need to utilize International Association of Chiefs of Police and National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives programs, mentoring programs, where we place some of our chiefs with senior chiefs in other departments so they can glean the knowledge from them to bring back to Dallas Police. And our old system, it was built upon lieutenants and the captains. We had 36 captains at one point. We no longer have them. And we were being able to build people under a civil service position. But we need to start at that rank of lieutenant for building the team. When we start talking about leveraging things for the future, leveraging opportunities for the future. And so in some ways, the old way we did things was problematic because it did not include fairness. I'll take a quote from a famous football coach who said, everyone will be treated fairly, but not everyone will be treated the same. And we need to understand how those things happen. So we'll place mid-level and upper command around the department, moving them around, rotating them around to build them so we can have a common sense presence and purpose, identifying the best and promising practices. Now, when I look at what roles are necessary, then I look at the bureaus and how we were restructured in bureaus. And I've seen them for 30 years. And I've been a part of a decision-making as a commander for going on 14 years. And I was at the table where the decisions were made for creativity and innovation since 2004. So I'll look at those things inside of our system and say, well, we need administration, we need operations, we need a field support and investigations, but where we can actually utilize civilian expertise as what we used to do that worked with the right people involved who understood policing from the outside. The hiring is most important of this person over administration bureau that is mainly 90% civilians. And we can place that assistant executive director in that place by making the right hire and move forward. And we shouldn't miss a beat on moving things forward. So I look over the academy personnel. We used to look at having a civilian.
Wrap it up here shortly.
And so we'll have a civilian over the academy who has expertise in policing, who best fits that bill, and then we can proceed to move forward. So as I laid out was the plan, the leveraging, the system in which we exist, and the roles that I believe that are necessary.
Thank you, Major Aziz. Same question for Assistant Chief Moore.
Yes, sir. So I'm going to start with kind of a sports theme, how you build a team. And I think that's what we're talking about. So as the head coach, I need to have assistant coaches. I need to have specialty coaches. And the most important quality to me is that you have a high work ethic. Because I know a lot of talented people who simply don't show up for work. But hardworking people are the people that tell you they're on the team, they want to be on the team, and they want to do the job that's required. I also look for core values. The police department has standards. You have to be honest. You have to have integrity. You have to have faithfulness, and you have to be truthful. So that's how you build an executive team. I had the actual pleasure of building a team under the bureau that I'm over now. I got to pick my deputy chief. I know him personally, but his work ethic's unquestionable. He comes to work. He works hard. he's dedicated, and he has all those qualities. Then I got to pick my majors. I used the same criteria because we're at a special moment in the Dallas Police Department. I respect everyone's decision. Candidly, we don't have time to do surveys and month-long interviews. We have to be in a position to where we can pick the right team now, and I'm in that position. As it relates to civilians, I'll piggyback on what Major Aziz said. When I began, we did have more civilians. They were in key roles. Because of economics, we had to rift them, meaning that we had to let them go. But I look forward to the day that we can bring them back. Police officers should do what police officers do, and civilians should do the jobs that they were intended to do. And again, the way you leverage all that is everybody's on the same team. Everybody's working for the same goal. To take a quote from Bill Belichick, everybody simply has to do their job. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Moore. The next question is going to call for a shorter response from everyone. And we're going to start with Deputy Chief Ramirez. And what I'm looking for is a yes or no. And then if it's no, I'd like a short explanation. Are you comfortable operating in an organization with a community police oversight board?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Deputy Chief Martinez, same question.
Same response, absolutely, yes.
Chief Garcia.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Major Aziz.
Yes, absolutely.
Chief Spivey.
Yes.
Assistant Chief Moore.
Yes, absolutely.
Chief Brackney.
Yes, 2 of my 3 have had oversight boards since 1997, so yes.
Thank you for that. Next question, we're going to start with Mr. Martinez. If you're selected as the next chief, you'll likely be working with people who applied for this job and didn't get it, and you know them. How would you manage that situation?
It's a matter of maintaining the relationships that we had before. It's still an evaluation process, but I saw the end result in the last through the last chief, and I understand those decisions that were made. But it's also not good for the organization. Doesn't mean that people won't be evaluated, but the talent will be brought forth, and we'll figure out. We'll have robust conversations, honest discussions, but we have amazing talent on the department, and we will utilize that talent because it's all about our community and about our service.
Thank you. Chief Garcia, as an outsider, you're going to be working with, if you were selected, you're going to be working with candidates that applied for the job. How are you going to manage that situation?
Well, first and foremost, having a conversation with the individuals that I will be working with, that I will have the honor of working with. And I would tell everyone to bring their notes because there have been some great ideas that have been thrown out today that we're gonna utilize. Letting them know that my goal is to bring what I've learned in the last 5 years of leading a major police department, and that I hope we could all learn from each other, that they could take away from the things that I've learned, the lessons that I've learned from mistakes that I've made, and the lessons learned from that, and to develop them and to let them know that we're in this together, we're a team. I've been a chief of a major city, and I want to develop the next chief of the Dallas PD from the individuals that are there, and that is my goal. And along with the other goals that we have for the city, we're a team, and we would move forward with that.
Thank you, Chief. Major Aziz, same question.
Yes, indeed. I understand the dynamics. I personally went through those dynamics, and I found myself on the other side of those dynamics. But the important thing was I came to work the very next day. I held my head up. I can say I lived this and continue to contribute to the men and women who can attest for that at Northeast Division, so one of the finest divisions across the board that we had. The key thing is to have open communication, and open communication goes both ways. The key is to make sure that you continue to be valued as a member of the command staff, and that as chief, that I value all people in the command staff and what their contributions are to the department and the city. But most important, followership can be more important than leadership, but leadership actually demands the followership. Every chief, has a right when you put into that position to make the police department better, and they also reserve the right to make it worse. And that can happen on all ends. And what we hope for to be a sustainable member and never contribute. I tell my people never to contribute to failure, never be part of a failure, and never fail intentionally to cause anyone else to fail. And that is the premise in which I built my professional career. I've exercised that due diligence and judgment to continue to be a counted on and supported member of the command staff, supported by rank and file and supported by the community.
Thank you. Chief Spivey, same question.
Obviously, they're a very talented, knowledgeable, experienced group, or they wouldn't be part of this prestigious group of finalists. So certainly would come in, demonstrate my respect for them, demonstrate my admiration for their success throughout the organization, find a place within my command staff if they weren't already in occupying that level of position, find a place within the command staff where they can continue to help me be successful and help lead the Dallas Police Department to future success.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. Chief, Assistant Chief Moore, how would you manage that situation?
So I'm going to refer to a word I used earlier a few times, value. I value people. I've had the opportunity to work with Malik at Northeast. I valued him there. I thought we worked well together, wouldn't stop. I never worked with Albert directly, but I've respected him, but not stopped doing that. He's still in our reserve program. And I work with Ruben Ramirez now. He's actually my deputy chief, and I respect him and always will. The key is that people need to feel valued, and they need to feel like you want them to be on the team, and I do. So nothing would change with how I treat them, because I believe I treat everybody with the dignity and the respect that they deserve.
Thank you for that, Assistant Chief Moore. I appreciate that. Chief Brackney, how would you manage that situation?
So thank you for that. The first thing I would do is acknowledge just what an honor it was to even participate with each and every one of them, knowing the history they have for their department. The other thing is acknowledge the bravery that they have to subject themselves to this kind of an open process and still be willing to stay in the process. And then I would build on what I heard each and every one of them say. There hasn't been one of the candidates here who are internal candidates who said they don't love this department and that they don't love Dallas. And then that's what you do to build that team and to continue to show them value, that we are vision aligned and we're value aligned, and the love for their communities. They wouldn't want to do anything within the organization that would continue or that would damage that in any way. So building on their love, their commitment to the department and a commitment to this community, I think we would be successful at building a team that could best serve the Dallas Police Department as well as the city and the residents of Dallas.
Thank you, Dr. Brackney. And Deputy Chief Ramirez, you're going to get the last word on this question. How would you manage that situation?
Well, I obviously have had the opportunity to work with both of the other internal candidates, and I know them well, and they're longtime police officers who have given their lives to this profession, and that's incredibly admirable, and I know their hearts. I mentioned earlier that the future of policing is the involvement of relationship building, and that would be my top priority, is relationship building. I expect that the responsibility to build trust and relationship in this community falls squarely on me, but I need that modeled by everyone within the organization. I know these two men. I know they have roles. They've always had key roles, and they continue to. But again, it would just be making sure that people were in the places where they could best lead this city forward, and with some of the challenges we have, and best lead the men and women of the Dallas Police Department.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Ramirez. Okay, I'm gonna skip ahead for 1 second and get to a yes/no question. And we'll start with Chief Brackney. Are you familiar with the Right Care program, and do you support that initiative?
Yes, familiar. Yes, support needs to be expanded.
Thank you. Deputy Chief Ramirez, same question.
Same answer. Yes, I've heard of it. Yes, I believe in it. And yes, it needs to be expanded.
Deputy Chief Martinez.
Yes, sir. I oversaw it at the South Central Patrol Division, and we are in the move of expanding it thanks to our city budget and to our residents and our city council.
Thank you. Chief Garcia.
Yes, we actually implemented in the city of San Jose this year. We support it and agree it needs to expand.
Thank you. Major Aziz.
Yes, I'm very familiar with it. And when it was started and when the funding was obtained for it in 2016 and we started in 2018 with the funding, I support it. And I'd like to take the time to thank the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute and Parkland and the Ruth Foundation for what they did with the program.
Thank you. Chief Spivey.
Yes, familiar with it. Yes, support it.
Thank you. Assistant Chief Moore.
Yes, sir. Absolutely, absolutely, and absolutely it needs to be increased.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you all for that timely response. Okay, we're going to move on to an accountability question. And we're going to start with Chief Garcia. And on your sheets, it's question 23. Tell us about an instance when you had to hold an officer accountable for improperly using force. What happened and what did you decide to do?
Well, what I've done personally has had officers that have come to my attention. We have a response and investigation to use of force in the city of San Jose, where depending on the level of force, it goes all the way to the chief's office, where we evaluate the force as to whether or not it should be investigated criminally or administratively. Those decisions aren't easy to make. When we see an officer via body-worn camera or via a report or via a complaint, we immediately take action. We immediately place, in those instances where we believe there's criminal culpability that we have done, we put the officer on leave and then worked with our criminal investigation team that we have out of Internal Affairs and work with the district attorney's office. Ultimately, it's something that I don't think any police chief, I think it's absolutely necessary. But if police chiefs, as a police chief, it's things that are difficult decisions to make. And I've had to live through those decisions. And ultimately, depending on the gravity of it, we've terminated the officer. And those terminations and those decisions are not easy to make. Working with our, and making sure that we acknowledge, making sure that once those processes are done, that we communicate with rank and file, as well as, the other members of the department to let them know what occurred.
And Chief, did you actually make that decision?
Yes.
Okay.
I actually made that. I'm sorry. No, I actually made that decision. And unfortunately, again, it's an unfortunate decision that one has to make. But going back to one of the things that I've heard from the community loud and clear in the last 5 years with regards to community trust, the one thing that I hear constantly over and over again is that police departments can't police themselves. So it's incredibly important for us to do that. It's incredibly important to acknowledge the fact that and continue to the cry that no one hates a bad cop more than a good cop. And we need to be credible to our community, do the right thing, and make sure no one tarnishes our badge. I've had to make that decision, and I would make the decision again if it was necessary.
Thank you, Chief. Major Aziz, same question.
Yes, holding officers accountable for the improper use of force is a major issue that I've had to deal with. When I served as the deputy chief of the Northwest Division, then I had an individual who committed an unnecessary use of force that was going to become public. And that individual, without giving away too much detail to destroy a person even further, then I got that information that he had taken an individual who was first a suspect with reasonable suspicion and taken him to a different part of town after he caught him trying to attempt to break into a location, but he didn't break into the location, and dropped him off in a territory that would be unsafe for him and the affiliations in which he had. I found out with that individual. We notified Public Integrity Unit, they capers and Public Integrity. They interviewed the officer who was with him and who told the story exactly like the citizen had told the story. It was immediate that he would be placed on administrative leave immediately. And then I called every community stakeholder who was going to hear about this incident of high impropriety of committing an unnecessary use of force in which the manner it was done, which was considered old school, like 70s, early 80s type of thing. And then I went to every detail because it was going to be an issue with the officer who was with him, who actually crossed that so-called thin blue line or blue wall of silence. And I met with all details across all watches and affirmed my support for the officer who actually came forward to tell the truth, doing what he was supposed to do. And then the recommendations in our system at the time, because only the chief of police can separate you from service. But my recommendation for that was a separation from service, a termination. And it wasn't long, it didn't take long to come to that conclusion, and we saw it through. And that individual was separated from service after committing a really atrocious act of unnecessary force, which would be considered by any citizen to be police brutality.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Major Aziz. Chief Spivey, same question.
So all uses of force are investigated through the chain of command. We investigate at the professional standards level any complaints of an excessive use of force or improper use of force, or if a supervisor through that review of use of force determines that the force was either excessive or improper. An investigation is formalized. Once the investigation is complete, a recommendation on discipline is based on the findings of that investigation and can include anything from coaching and retraining all the way through suspension or termination. In my time as chief of police, I've never had to terminate anyone for excessive use of force, but we have done counseling and coaching and retraining of officers who improperly used force. It did not rise to the level of being excessive.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. Assistant Chief Moore, tell us about a specific instance where you had to hold someone accountable for improperly using force. What happened? What'd you decide to do?
So it was actually just a few weeks ago, had an officer that was accused of using inappropriate force against a civilian. And although the civilian didn't complain, it was captured on video. So what concerned me the most is that the officer was unaware, and completely forgot his training. He didn't understand when to use force, what level to use force. So that was my concern. For his actions, I did suspend him, but I also mandated training for him, and I put him on a performance improvement plan just to ensure that he understood the law as it relates to use of force. He understood our processes and procedures as it relates to use of force, and to make sure that he actually went and got the training from our training command staff. So that's a real current example of what I've done.
And what process did you follow? Did that go through the internal affairs, or is that handled at a different level?
Yes, sir. All our complaints goes to our internal affairs division. And they allegate, and once it's allegated, there's a chain recommendation. And as Malik said, I can't separate from the department. I can only recommend, but I do have the autonomy to actually suspend and go through the process that I just explained.
Thank you for that, Assistant Chief Moore. I appreciate that. Chief Brackney, same question.
So thank you. I think I first want to start this out by saying, let's just clearly say excessive force starts when resistance stops. There is no improper or accidentally not using force according to when your training is. If you violate your training, it is excessive. Recently had a case in my department when an officer was accused of having excessive force. and we took it first. We looked at that force. I assigned it to the highest levels, and not just for an internal affairs investigation. We had the Commonwealth's attorney look at that for us. At the results of the Commonwealth's attorney looking at that, they deemed that it was excessive force, and the officer was charged with assault and battery. So we took it criminally. That officer was just convicted this past Friday for assaulting an individual using excessive force. Currently, because it is in the criminal stages, we cannot start an internal affairs investigation. But because of the warrant and he was arrested, his police powers, I immediately suspended his police powers. And with that suspension of police powers, I can't talk about what the next steps are, but he was placed on leave. And when I do leave here, if it's suspension of your police powers, it is not paid administrative leave. You don't have police powers, you've been charged with a crime, we're not paying you. We wouldn't pay anyone else who was a defendant in the case. That case is still ongoing as there is an appeal. And then we will then do the internal affairs investigation.
Thank you, Chief Brackney. Deputy Chief Ramirez, same question.
Yes, sir. So first off, I would say that excessive force has obviously contributed to the erosion of public trust in our communities and our law enforcement agencies across the country. We've seen that throughout the summer with the protests. So I will tell you, having been a supervisor over public integrity, I have investigated officers criminally for excessive force. Having been the division commander of internal affairs, I've investigated officers over the years for the administrative component of excessive force. And I've also been involved in taking these cases over to the district attorney's office and seeing that some of those cases have been followed up with prosecution. So I've been involved in all facets of it, from the recommendation part of it to the investigating, both administratively and criminally, and facilitating the exchange of information to the district attorney's office.
Thank you. And last but not least, Mr. Martinez.
Thank you again, Gary. So to the point that the gross violations that we find in the department, we take action, and even up to the point of separating them from the department so that we can protect the department. It's really aggravating for us when we see a person that deliberately commits a gross violation and it tarnishes the rest of us. So we do take swift action. More directly to the question, one instance where we had an officer use improper force was a young officer that went up into an attic during a deadly force encounter where we believe we had an armed suspect up there. He went up there and fired the pepper ball launcher into the attic, exposing himself to safety. So immediately the demand was that we want to do a control number, which is basically an investigation. And what I asked of my commanders was, well, have we talked to him? Have we even gone down to the root of why he did this and in the safety violation? Ultimately, what happened was the officer believed he was within policy when he wasn't. We talked to him, we coached, we counseled. He ended up getting disciplined. But at the same time that we were doing the discipline, it was not about ripping out his heart. It was about encouraging him to listen to your training, go back to your training. We'll show you how to do it and get back to work because we need you out there. So that's how I see our discipline process in those minor violations.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Appreciate that. So we're at a little bit after 5, and so I want to give each candidate an opportunity to close this out and the way you see fit. I'm going to give each one of you 2 minutes, and we're going to start the way we came in. And so we'll start with Major Aziz.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the panel and the people who are listening. I'll just go down a list and reiterate what I started out with. I listened to the citizens, I read some of the surveys, and going on social media. You've asked for a person who is from Dallas. I'm from Dallas. I was born in Dallas, in the same environment, in a city, understanding those issues. You've asked for someone who understood the city. I graduated from Dallas Carter. You've asked for an educated individual. I have a BA in criminology and an MBA from the University of Dallas. I'm a family man. I have 29 years with this Dallas Police Department. Almost 14 years have been in command, and I've been in the room of a progressive department, the best in the nation, from 04 to 2016. You've asked for me to wear another hat, a chief who can wear another hat and do other things. I'm an adjunct professor at DeSales University. I put on the National Black Police Association, speaking as a major voice for the 110,000 Black police officers across this country. You've asked that I do other things. You've asked that I've had education in command schools. So I graduated from the top command schools in the nation. You've asked that a person would be here who could command and demand with a leadership style and lead a police department against violence. I have 6 years in Northwest for consecutive crime reduction. I led the most crime reductive program in the nation and in this city, as far as we know, and that was Operation Triangle, which reduced crime in unprecedented levels of the summer of 2010 and has been replicated in various forms. You've asked for an innovative police chief. I started the Bait Equipment Program, the only national program. Many other departments have taken that program and took it to a new level. You've asked for a person who understands youth. Then I restarted the Police Activity Athletic League back in 2007, which put us on the forefront of community policing like we've never seen, which came to light on the heels of 7/7/2016. I have all what it takes to be the police chief of this city. I've done all that I could to earn it on my own. And so I sit here before you today to express those interests, and I look forward to going over my resume and the history in which I have provided in further detail with council, with the city manager, mayor, and community who believe in me. And I just want to thank you guys so much for believing in me and having faith in me, and for the opportunity to sit on this stage today. Thank you, Gary.
Dr. Rackney.
So thank you.
Any kind of 2-minute closing.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and for everyone to take out their time to listen to this for the last 3 hours or so. When you're looking for a leader, you're looking for someone who is innovative, a thought leader, has been ahead of the curve, a visionary long before. I am close to my 4th decade in policing, and I am a proven candidate across multiple jurisdictions and across multiple agencies. I bring with me a breadth and depth of experience, not only in just municipal policing, but also in post-secondary. I also have developed and been on the cutting edge of developing curriculum for policing that are best practices and standards across the nation. I currently are sought after for advice on how do we reduce bias-based and hate crimes, as we've seen a rise on those across the nation, and we're not any different. My expertise in handling crowd management and demonstrations and rallies is unprecedented, and that the rallies and marches and demonstrations that I've been a part of since 2009 in Pittsburgh, when they had the G20, through the current ones that occurred through the summer of this year, have been without incident. That is unheard of, without incident, without a single police clash involved in each and every one of those, without damage to our communities. When you look for a proven leader, you look for someone this is their lived experience. This is part of who they are. And then you reach out so it's part of the community they serve's shared experience. Yes, we all have knowledge, we all have resumes, we all have other things, but you know what? I stand in this place based on those who have gone before me. As a minority, multi-ethnic person, I stand in front of each and every one of you based on my grit and my grace, and not necessarily in that order. So I'm excited and proud to have the opportunity to be considered for the next police chief here in Dallas.
Thank you, Chief Rackney. Chief Garcia, your closing.
Thank you for the opportunity. Again, I'm humbled to be alongside the 6 other candidates for this opportunity. It's a blessing. Again, I owe it to the men and women of the San Jose Police Department that I even had an opportunity to be in front of you for the things we've accomplished. We've had a lot of accomplishments, all of us has, and we have our resume, and I'm not going to read everything that we began with. What I will say is my last 8 years, 3 as the executive assistant and 5 as the sitting chief of police, or the 10th largest city in the country, a bilingual chief, I feel that I can connect with my entire community. San Jose is very diverse. And I feel that the experiences that I've had, the mistakes that I've made, and the things that I've learned from them, because none of us are perfect in this imperfect profession, can assist us in the city of Dallas and it can ensure that the residents of Dallas feel safe and our community feels heard. I have a connection with Dallas. I know, being part of Major City Chiefs Association, I will tell you that there's several chiefs around the country that knew that if this opportunity would have ever arisen, that I was going to be interested in it. The connection to the city of Dallas, I've visited the city several times. Sounds like a corny story, and I'll try to make this short, but as a young child growing up, how to speak English in the mid 70s, there was only 3 football teams on TV, and the 49ers weren't very good. The Raiders were okay, and then you had the Cowboys. So I became a huge Dallas Cowboy fan. I'm probably the biggest Dallas Cowboy fan in the Bay Area. My kids are Cowboys fans, even though every once in a while they curse me for it these days, but we get over that. And so one way or the other, I've been to the city dozens of times. I've seen the city. I love the city. Reminds me a lot of San Jose. And I will tell you this, one way or the other, my plan in retirement was going to end up in the state of Texas in this area. So this is not a whim. I feel connected to the city. And as an outsider coming in, I know that I will love the city of Dallas.
Thank you, Chief. Deputy Chief Martinez, your closing.
Thank you again, Gary. Again, I want to echo what Chief Garcia said. It really is an honor to be here with my fellow candidates to be considered. We've been watched by many of our residents and visitors, by officers, by commanders, and of course our civic leaders and our city management. And I just want to echo that I've built a reputation of dependability, fairness, and trust throughout the ranks, especially with our officers. And I just want to give everyone a message of hope. It is true that we have an amazing department. I know we've gone through many things together. We went through July 7th, and the community was there to support us. They really uplifted us. They've also increased pay and benefits through their influence on city management and our civic leaders. And it's time, officers, that we follow whoever the next leader is, and we move forward. I'm still a reserve officer because I believe in what we do. I'm passionate about it. In a sense, it's hard to let go of that badge. I've been on that other side, but eventually that day truly comes. But right now, it is about serving, and don't ever lose hope. What you have done is remarkable and amazing after what we went through on July 7th. And in the words of the great H.C. Christian, may he rest in peace, don't let anyone ever tell you any different. It is an honor and a privilege to be a Dallas police officer. You're always in my hearts and in my minds, just like our community. Keep serving, stay strong, and one way or the other, I will be by you as a reserve or as your chief or whatever God wills for me to be alongside you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Assistant Chief Moore, your 2-minute closing.
Yes, sir. So first of all, again, I'm humble. I'm very thankful just to have the opportunity to interview. As I stated, this is my dream job. I have grown up on this department, literally. I came here as a boy straight out of college that knew nothing. Everything I've learned really about life, I've learned through the Dallas Police Department. I'm a family man. I've been able to raise 3 outstanding sons. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't have the opportunity to join this police department. I'm a man of integrity, of faithfulness and truthfulness, and I believe that we can build a team and we can satisfy the deliveries that the community wants and needs. So again, thank you for this opportunity. I am ready. I'm ready to hit the ground running, and I do believe that we can do some wonderful things together as a team. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Moore. Deputy Chief Ramirez, your 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, first off, again, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to lead this police department. I have been given so many opportunities in my time with the Dallas Police Department. This city and this police department has asked me to represent them over the years in national conferences throughout the country, representing the city in LA and NYPD. I've been the state legislative representative and been able to testify on behalf of this city and this police department. I've I'm indebted to the city of Dallas. Everything that I've really I've learned here, arriving at 22 years old. You grow up here. I believe that the city is primed for great things. I've seen more of our community mobilize and stand up and recognize that police can't do it all, and they want to be part of the solution. I've seen our faith-based leaders who have really been doing it right the whole time stand up and say we're ready. I've worked with our immigrant community after SB4 passed and seen the fear that created in our non-English speaking community, and worked with them and seen that their fears subside and start to have confidence in what we could do together. If we were interviewing for a job in any city in America right now, I wouldn't be able to say this, but in Dallas, Texas, I feel that I'm the best fit to lead this police department based on the relationships I've built, the trust that I have within the organization, and the partnerships that I've built throughout the region, the state, and the country. We're going to all have to work together moving forward. There are challenges ahead, but I know that we're destined for success, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to lead this police department. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Ramirez. And Chief Spivey, you're going to get the last word tonight. 2 minutes, your closing, sir.
What do you get is when you appoint Jeff Spivey to the next chief of police for the Dallas Police Department, you get an individual who has been a chief of police, who understands the gravity of the decisions that are made at that level, who understands the pressure and the stress, and recognizes the expectation of our community in that position. You get someone who's local, who has relationships with not only the law enforcement agencies and partners in North Texas, but the community groups and the business groups, who already has established relationships with all of those stakeholders, who doesn't have to come in and establish themselves, who doesn't have to come in and have their name known. That's already been taken care of. We can hit the ground running. What else do you get? You get someone who's innovative. You get someone who's courageous. You get someone who is inspirational. I truly care about the men and women of policing. I think that those police officers who swore an oath, who put a badge on every day, serve the most noble of professions, and they do so many times without regard for their own lives, and many times facing harsh criticism, facing negative outcomes, facing unfair characterizations. And they need an inspirational leader who has hope in our profession, who has hope in them, and who can lead them through the changes that are on the horizon for our profession. I think I'm that person.
Thank you, Chief Spivey, and I want to thank all the candidates on behalf of the City of Dallas and Public Sector Search and Consulting for being with us today and participating in this process. I know you guys still have a long day tomorrow, so this concludes the public interview forum at this point, and thank you. Karen, you can turn the recorder off.
Thanks, Gary.
You guys tired?
Yes.
We're good. It's such a pleasure to meet you all versus your email addresses. Literally a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise.
All right.
You guys did outstanding, so thank you so much. All right? All right, we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Chris.